got this 'cause I've had it all along. I'm phenomenal, I'm enough. I don't need you to tell me who to be. Can someone just hold me? Don't fix me, don't try to change a thing. Can someone just know me? 'Cause underneath I'm broken and it's beautiful. Hey, I'm broken and it's beautiful. I'm broken and it's beautiful. Hey, I'm broken and it's beautiful. I'm broken and it's beautiful. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, can I just be tired? Without piling on, all sad and scared and out of time. I'm wired. Can I just be wise? Without feeling like I'm failing and I'm losing my mind. Can someone just hold me? Don't fix me, don't try to change a thing. Oh, someone just know me. 'Cause underneath I'm broken and it's beautiful. 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 It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You're giving me a million reasons to let you go. You're giving me a million reasons to quit the show. You're giving me a million reasons. Give me a million reasons. Giving me a million reasons. About a million reasons. If I had a highway, I would run for the hills. If you could find a dry way, I'd forever be still. But you're giving me a million reasons. Give me a million reasons. Giving me a million reasons. About a million reasons. I bow down to pray. I try to make the worst seem better. Lord, show me the way to cut through all this worn out leather. I've got 100 million reasons to walk away, but baby, I just need one good one to stay. Head stuck in a cycle, I look off and I stare. It's like that I've stopped breathing but completely aware. 'Cause you're giving me a million reasons. Give me a million reasons. Giving me a million reasons. About a million reasons. And if you say something.
The study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, December 7th, 2020 is called to order. There was no executive session. There's no mayor's update. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none. Would the clerk, yeah. Oh, let's call the roll. The clerk, please call the roll.
Yes. Mayor Kaufman,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnston,
Here.
Councilmember Bergen,
Here.
Councilmember Berzins,
Here.
Councilmember Coombs,
Present.
Councilmember Gardner,
Here.
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Hiltz,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Marcano, Councilmember Marcano,
Present.
and Councilmember Murillo.
Present.
We
Mayor
are all here.
Councilmember Berzins.
Berzins, thank you. Yeah, I have an update. I'm sorry, I was muted and couldn't punch it fast enough. So anyway, I would like, propose that this council, this city, write a letter to Governor Polis and send it to Dr. Douglas and ask that we open up our restaurants again, at least at 25% capacity. It's cold outside and the patios, most of them are not open. Even if they can open because it's so cold, they can't open. I think our citizens want to know that we stand with them and we value their jobs. And I think it would also help cover the back of Governor Polis. So I thought a lot about this. This close down of inside restaurants is really hurting the working class, the low income people. They're the ones that need the jobs. And I think that we as a city need to express to Governor Polis our desires to help our residents of Aurora as quickly as possible. I know this is not going to change his mind, Shazam, but I think it will give him an idea of that we care about our people and they want their jobs, and the working class and the low income need to get out and work. The stimulus checks are fine, but a $300 check is not going to last very long. they need to be and want to be self-sufficient and get out there and work again. So I'm asking my fellow council members to consider it. I know that staff can write it up for us, or I can work with staff to send it to Governor Polis and Dr. Douglas.
Mayor?
Let's see who Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, I would be in full support of that. I know some other elected officials have sent letters to Governor Polis asking him to open up the restaurants. And I think it's reasonable that Councilmember Berzins has asked for, I think you said 25% capacity. So
At
that they can,
least, yeah.
yeah, so, or at least so that they can still, follow the safety guidelines for their customers. But December that is like their best month for revenue, is the month of December, and they're completely shut down with, some exceptions for takeout, which is not enough to pay their leases. So I would be in support.
Thank you.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I also support. I think that I understand the spike in COVID cases. I see what's happening around the city and around the state. But at the same time, restaurants haven't been identified as the primary vector of those. Most of those are coming from family gatherings, or multifamilies are coming together, according to the presentations we've received from Tri-County Health. The restaurants have gone out of their way to implement safe dining practices, and I think that they can continue to operate at a minimum of 25% safely. And as was mentioned earlier, I know some of our surrounding cities and towns have sent letters like this, and I would recommend that Aurora do the same.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councilmember Coombs.
point of process, I'm not sure that during issue updates is the appropriate time to be discussing intergovernmental advocacy. I think that goes as an agenda item and through Pfizer first. So I'm concerned that we're discussing this now when it's not on the agenda.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
We have done this in the past years where we have requested a letter, and we've done it during study session without it being on the agenda, I believe.
Well,
We have many times.
okay. If there's no objection, why don't we proceed this way, assuming that Councilmember Berzins is in agreement? And that is that staff would compose a letter. You would then approve the letter, and that the letter would require the signatures of 6 members, to include yourself, before it can go out.
Yeah, that would be fine. And maybe we can send it out via email. And
Sure.
the sooner we get it out, the better, if it gets 6 signatures.
Right.
Okay.
Mayor,
Any objection to that? Councilmember Coombs.
No, Hiltz.
Councilmember Hiltz.
I think Councilmember Berzins can still send send it to the full council, obviously, so that we can see it. I think it only requires 6 for it to go on city letterhead, but people can still send any letter they
Correct.
want
Correct.
to. Okay.
Thank you.
That's the way we're proceeding.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion? Yes, Councilmember Coombs.
so I just want to clarify that also we're proposing a letter to our governor that advocates overriding public health officials. Is that correct?
Correct.
I will definitely not be signing that then.
Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, then that's the way we'll proceed. That if it has 6 signatures on it, then it can go forward under city letterhead. Consent calendar, items 2A through 2F. Is there any objection to moving the consent calendar forward? Seeing none, then items number 2A through 2F of the consent calendar will move forward. Items from the policy committee. Item number 3A, affirming Aurora's commitment to valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Janice Napper.
Yes, Mayor and Council, welcome. I do have well, I don't know if I can share or not, but I did have a short presentation, but I will. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, not sure that's working. Susan, can you share that, please? Susan
Um,
Burton,
Give me just 1 second.
thank you.
Patty, if you can switch me to be the presenter, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. And next slide. And I'm the Officer of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the city. The office was created in January 2020 in order to lead the city of Aurora in building, creating, and maintaining a more equitable and inclusive city. As you can see, the office reports directly to the city manager. Next slide. Thank you. Community Relations was moved under the Office of DEI in June 2020 in order to broaden the focus of community relations. Next, the City of Aurora is a partner. We're partnering with GEAR, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. We're a member city. There are over 150 cities as well as other municipalities and federal and state organizations that are members. The organization provides tools to put theory into action. And we are actually, there are some things that we are partnering with them. As an example, an employee survey, which all of council as well as our 3,600 or so headcount employees have received. Next slide. Our mission statement for DEI: lead the city in building, creating, and maintaining a more equitable and inclusive city by systemically and strategically facilitating the integration of greater representation, fairness, belonging, and care in our policies, procedures, and practices. Next, how are we taking action? What have we been doing and what are we been doing? As I mentioned, we are using the assessment tool that GEAR has provided to us. The survey was actually open for about a month. We received about a 33% response rate from our employees. And it's to assess the current state of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city of Aurora from an employee standpoint. What do the employees know about racial equity? Do we have racial equity tools in our departments, as well as in the organization? This will give us a baseline as to where we are from an employee standpoint on how we provide our services, how employees are treated, do they feel cared about, et cetera. We are consulting or engaging with a consultant. We're in the process of negotiations. And that consultant will provide facilitated dialogues and training with city leadership, employee groups, and community stakeholders. And the community engagement partnership is very important to this whole racial equity journey. And you will see that in the resolution as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. One of the things that we will be doing with the equity champions, I'll talk about that in a minute, is creating working groups and pilot projects where we will actually be looking at how we provide our services and our policy and procedures through a racial equity lens. Some proposed areas are community engagement, workforce equity, which would be from an HR standpoint, and contracting and purchasing. And one of the goals is the goal is to design and implement a racial equity plan. Next slide. And the equity champions, we have identified 1 to 2, sometimes more employees from each one of our city departments. They are part of the racial equity core team. They make up the leadership team for the city. And right now we're in the normalizing stage in our racial equity journey. We're normalizing the conversations about race internally. The equity champions will provide leadership, facilitation, and coaching in the departments, and they'll assist in the implementation of the racial equity plan and lead some of the working groups. Next slide. The resolution, which is attached, and I won't read the whole resolution, but the resolution is a firm Aurora's commitment to valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is part, the National League of Cities, as well as ICMA, the International City Managers Association, they both recommend that elected officials and upper leadership, they make a public declaration and they lead the way in advancing racial equity in our city. This sets an example and strikes the right tone and begins the community engagement. And when I say begin, a lot of the council members, they've already started community engagement, and that's part of what you do. But again, this is a public declaration to the community as well as to the employees for our commitment as a city to valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Any questions?
Questions? Seeing none, thank you for that presentation. And for all you do, I don't believe that this requires any action on the part of our council, but it's informative in its nature and really appreciate it. Appreciate all you do.
Mayor,
Mayor?
Oh, please.
Oh, excuse me. I would like to forward this resolution to City Council for formal adoption.
Okay.
That is the action step.
Okay, then, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. Is there further discussion on the resolution as to whether or not it should move forward? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving the resolution forward? Seeing none, item number 3A will move forward. Thank you very much, Janice.
Thank you.
Item number 3B. Purchase of a gravel lake water storage facility adjacent to the South Platte River near Brighton. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Richard Vidmar. I'm the Integrated Basin and Ecosystem Services Manager for Aurora Water Department and Water Resources. Item we have is the amended and restated purchase and sale agreement. I do have a presentation I believe Susan may be bringing up. The history on the project is in 2003, Aurora entered into an agreement with Aggregate Industries to purchase water storage in the lower South Platte River near the town of Brighton. Estimated storage at that time was around 4,000 acre feet, and the cost at that time was $3,000 per acre foot. And that cost was to be adjusted over time based off the consumer price index. Also at that time, the city made about a $1.5 million down payment for the project. As the Prairie Waters project developed, we identified the need for aquifer recharge and recovery in that part of the river. And this site was a potential candidate for that. And we initiated an agreement with Aggregate Industries called the Master Water Storage Development Agreement to look at this site and also other potential sites for replacement, and would allow us to develop the ARR site. Unfortunately, Aggregate Industries was not able to ratify the agreement in their corporate structure, and we ended up terminating the agreement in 2006. As the current status, Aggregate Industries was not able to mine the site. They had other sites that they needed to mine and deliver. And as such, our original purchase and sale agreement was set to expire in 2017. We initiated those discussions with Aggregate Industries to amend and restate the agreement. And what we came up with was a new agreement to adjust the purchase price to $4,000 per acre foot with no escalation, so no adjustment in time. We made a supplemental down payment and looking at the site and some of the setbacks, we estimate the storage to be about 3,500 acre feet. They're currently working through their permitting process right now with Adams County. And once they begin mining, they believe it'll be about 10 years to mine the site. The city does own a couple in-holding parcels within the project site, some 2 small 5-acre parcels within the larger site. And as I mentioned, Aggregate Industries is applying for their permits. The contract will allow for some extensions in case they're not able to obtain their permits. We give them a chance to continue that process. Some additional costs that are proposed in the agreement. We will reimburse Aggregate Industries $6 per face foot of slurry wall. So the slurry wall is the kind of underground dam that we build to isolate this gravel pit from the surrounding groundwater. We will reimburse them for that as it's constructed. And then we will pay an additional 90 cents per face foot for QA/QC to have our contractors on site to supervise that important piece of infrastructure as it's going in. So we'll have our folks on the ground there. What the city gets back in return for our down payments and for our reimbursement costs of the slurry wall is once that wall is certified by the Colorado State Engineer, Aggregate Industries will actually deed us the land over. In addition, we will secure all the monies that we've paid to date with a deed of trust. So that way, if Aggregate Industries does default, we've got the ability to foreclose on our investment. So where we're at today, Aggregate will mine the site. There will be 2 individual storage cells totaling right around 3,500 acre feet. Aggregate Industries would mine our 2 parcels for us. And in exchange, they will get the royalties from that, and we will get the storage at no cost for those small parcels. This facility was planned actually as part of the Prairie Waters back in 2003. It will become a component of that overall larger system. What we like about this agreement is that it sets the storage price in $2020. We don't allow that escalation to occur. Final unit cost is again $4,000 for a 2020 delivery. The approximate project cost is right around $14 million. The question we have for council is, does council approve this item and recommend it that it be forwarded to the floor for consideration? In addition, we're also in the packet, we have included a draft letter of support from the mayor's office to Adams County Board of County Commissioners to support the project in advance of the permitting activities within Adams County. So any questions, Mr. Mayor?
I have a couple, Mayor.
Yes, Francois.
Oh, thanks, Rich. And of course, you did present this to the Water Policy Committee, so I'm kind of going to reiterate a couple points, but the price was based on, the increase in the price you said was based on basically the market for water storage. And I had asked if there were any other buyers, and you did say that there had been some gravel pits mined, but you didn't specifically answer if there were buyers for this particular one. So just wondering.
Yeah, so we've been under contract with Aggregate Industries since 2003. And so we're, because they didn't mine the site in time, we're renegotiating the contract. So there aren't any other buyers that are being marketed to right now. We're in the position, because they're still holding our down payment, that we are negotiating right now. Had we not had that position, Aggregate would have been able to market this to other folks.
and maybe secure a higher price. So, I mean, you feel like it's a fair price?
I do, yes, I believe so. We have purchased water storage facilities in this general area. Back in 2011, I believe was the last one that we negotiated. At that time, the price was $3,500 per acre foot. So we're now at 4,000, almost 9 years later.
Yes, very good. And then just secondly, obviously, we are sending the letter to encourage the commissioners to approve the permitting. And why did they not approve the permitting? And is that going to be an issue?
That's a good question. So in 2003, 2004 timeframe, Adams County Agri Industries did obtain their conditional use permit from the county. Because they didn't mine in a certain time frame, their permit expired. And so they had to go and renew that with the county because of an expired permit. So they did take it to the county last year around this time. The BOCC actually did deny it, mostly due to traffic concerns, trucking, that kind of stuff that goes along with the sand and gravel mine. They're back with kind of a new plan to use conveyor belts to move the material through to eliminate the trucking. And also they did a lot more community engagement with the surrounding community second time around in their application.
Thank you very much.
Are there further questions or comments?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
So Richard, I want to just go a little bit deeper on that. So when they reached out to the community, are we talking Brighton, and have we received, has the city of Aurora received any complaints or any concerns from Brighton or the other jurisdictions around there?
We have not. We've actually engaged at a staff level with the city of Brighton. We've been talking to our counterparts in their utilities department, as well as some of the surrounding neighbors in terms of what the site maybe look like in the future in terms of landscaping plans, those kind of things. So we have engaged some members of the community that have reached out to us.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3B forward? Seeing none, then item number 3B will move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3C, housing study results. Jessica Prosser.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are here today to talk a little bit about the housing study. We were last with you in June, and from there we had some action items to complete. And so we're now back with a final version, a final draft, and kind of hopefully nearing the finish line on this. So next slide, please. So this project was started about 18 months ago. It's kind of as an overview. From there, we moved through the different parts of the project. When we met with you last in June, we were getting ready to go out and do another round of community engagement. We put out a survey. We circled back with many of the groups that we had spoke to at the beginning of the project. And so now we're back with the final draft and moving through the adoption schedule. Next slide. So kind of as a reminder, the different kind of project overview, this is really a project looking at creating a policy framework around housing for the city of Aurora. This is taking into account our Aurora Places, our market studies around housing, bringing in the community input, and really looking to see where we're headed around housing, from preservation to creating new housing, and different policies and programs that go along with that. So with that, these were kind of the different action items to move through for the project, updating some of the 2018 housing market study, taking an inventory of what we currently do, developing a best practice toolkit, and we vetted that with the stakeholders in the second round of community engagement. And then we've developed a list of recommendations around housing. Just kind of want to preference it that every recommendation is not that, we'll be coming back with a lot of these. They'll require more council input and community input as we fully vet these and implement them. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Krasnowski to go through some of the specific input that we received from the community. And then I'll take back over with some of the actual recommendations that we have recommended. Go ahead, Daniel.
Great, thank you. For the recording, this is Daniel Krasnowski with the city's planning department. I wanted to walk through the public engagement element of this study, including the most recent round of public outreach that we did late summer. But there has been community input throughout the process. Early in the process last year, we conducted a series of stakeholder focus groups. The invitees included really a diversity of stakeholders, including both affordable and market rate housing developers, realtors, housing advocates, residents, of course, healthcare providers, some of our public partners, as well as boards and commissions, and others who have an interest and a stake in housing issues in Aurora. The input we got was really valuable about people's priorities, people's experiences, what the opportunities are, and what are some of the challenges for providing affordable housing and a diversity of housing in the community. We also have briefed a number of boards and commissions throughout the process. Recently, in this final round, we briefed the Planning and Zoning Commission, and also the Citizens Advisory Committee for Housing and Community Development. And as I mentioned, the final round of public input into the study was conducted sort of late summer into fall, and that was an online public survey in which we asked those respondents to review a draft set of recommendations, a draft study, and help us prioritize their interest and their support for the recommendations included in that draft. We had also asked them to suggest if there were case studies, model programs, best practices, or additional data to monitor. We got good feedback on that question, and we were able to post the survey both in English and Spanish and a web page in both languages. We also benefited from some other housing-related projects that were going on last year. The assessment of fair housing, which was a regional effort, but had great representation from Aurora residents. We benefited from the feedback that we got from really an extensive housing survey through that process, as well as focus groups that were hosted here in Aurora. The city was also conducting and updating its consolidated plan, which always includes an outreach efforts. And so there were a number of public meetings here in Aurora, additional surveys and public hearings, all on the topic of housing and housing needs. Because these were all really going on at the same time, all these projects were able to benefit from the feedback that they were receiving. So I wanted to go through somewhat briefly the fall survey response that we got. The document that was included in your packet, the report itself has an appendix. Appendix A includes a lot of this data as well. So if you want to refer to that as well, that should be helpful. We had a really great feedback turnout for this survey. We received over 640 total responses from really a mix of Aurora stakeholders. 86% of the respondents live in Aurora. Over half also work in Aurora. We got really great feedback from people representing local hospitals or healthcare providers, as well as a few other groups that we targeted, including developers and home builders, real estate agents and brokers, housing advocates and social service providers, and others. So you see a little bit of the breakdown of the total number of responses by group. We asked people a couple sort of demographic questions just to make sure we were sort of getting a broad representation in the response. We asked people if they own their home or rent their home. You can see the response there. Almost 2/3 of the respondents own their home, about 1/3 rent their home, and the remainder have another living situation. This is fairly close to Aurora as a whole, so we felt that representation was pretty good. Here you can see it broken down by zip code of the respondent. These are the Aurora-based zip codes. So you can see we received good feedback from all of those zip codes. And to really sort of summarize the results, we asked people for feedback both on the policy recommendations and on the strategy recommendations. Overall, there was very strong support for the policy recommendations, especially for some of the recommendations that included adding new affordable units or rehabilitating affordable units. And there seemed to be a desire to expand the city's support and partnerships to address housing needs in the community. The feedback was a little bit more mixed as far as some of the financial strategy recommendations. Because these issues can be somewhat complex, at this point we were able to sort of just generally recommend pursuing some of these strategy recommendations. They did not have extensive details on them, and that may be part of the reason why people were a little bit more mixed in their response, because they didn't have the details at that time. What you see on your screen is the policy recommendations that were included in the draft report. We asked people to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest support, 5 being the highest support. What you see here is your weighted average scores. As you can see, all of these received above average or fairly high levels of support, including setting citywide specific goals for the construction of affordable housing, investing in the rehabilitation of existing homes and apartments for long-term affordable housing, and adding housing units at price levels both at the high end and at the low end of the income spectrum, both for sale and rental housing, really addressing the full housing spectrum of needs for households. This slide lists the specific strategy recommendations. These are the actual sort of tangible activities, programs, policies, studies, and so forth that are recommended to support those policies. As you can see here, many of them received fairly strong support from the community, including implementing neighborhood and area planning, piloting innovative housing projects for both rental and homeownership, identifying further amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance to encourage and enable additional affordable housing to be built, and others. Again, as I mentioned, a couple of the recommendations that scored sort of more mixed were the creation of a housing trust fund that's a local housing finance source of funding, waiving or reducing development fees, and partnering the development of a home share program. These are all potentially valuable and effective tools, but they're also fairly complicated, and the details of these will come forward to you all in future. We didn't have really an extensive description of the details of these programs in the report. And finally, I wanted to sort of summarize some of the additional feedback that we got. These are some of the themes that emerged and some of the common comments. There was support for aligning planning and zoning with developing innovative housing projects. The idea that social services are really critical to pair with housing support came through. There was a lot of interest in accessory dwelling units to meet both household needs or provide supplemental income to households. The idea of housing first approach to addressing homelessness
as well as support for transitioning renters into homeowners and providing that for opportunity in Aurora, and the others you can see there. These are, again, from the community and came through the survey in a number of different ways. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Jessica to talk about the document and some of our priority action steps.
Thanks, Daniel. So as part of the document, there's the list of different recommendations within there. Each one has sort of a data set of how we're going to measure these, along with performance measures, which are really important to understanding, are we moving the needle related to housing? Today, we can say we've rehabbed this many single family homes. We've put, gap financing towards so many new developed homes, but really kind of taking it down to the programmatic level and really understanding how we're impacting not just from homelessness all the way up to executive housing in Aurora, what our mix is, and sort of track where our gaps are on an ongoing basis. So the document has a lot more detail related to that in terms of the data, and also, fully describing each of the different recommendations that Daniel just described. So based on the survey data, our conversations with council members and presenting at previous study sessions, we came up with a top 6 that if you said, staff, well, where should we start and where should we go? We're looking at some of these being low-hanging fruit. We're looking at some of them being within the staff capacity that we have today. And within the resources that we have. And so a lot of these will come back with more formal policy statements, with resource needs attached to them. But we wanted to present, not just we're moving towards asking council to move forward with the adoption of the full plan, but also the top 6 based on the previous input. So as Daniel mentioned, one of them being a housing finance strategy. We've just kind of scratched the surface on this year with putting together the gap financing process for affordable housing and having an evaluation process. This would be really kind of furthering that and understanding where does it make the most sense to use the resources that we have or additional resources to put towards a housing finance strategy. The next one would be to support some pilot projects. Many of these have been mentioned in the city, whether that be a tiny home village or more permanent supportive housing in a unique way. More of the courtyard development has come up in other places within the city. So kind of supporting some of these pilot projects, even if they are not meeting every single one of our pieces of code that we have. Again, making some updates to the UDO, changing the definition or broadening the definition of affordable housing a little bit to be more inclusive of the different product types that could come about is one, expanding and looking at accessory dwelling units, and if those can be expanded to other parts of the city is another one that's been identified. Next slide. Conducting an inventory of land is really important. So this isn't just city-owned land. This is looking at where we have gaps in different housing types. So in some areas, we have a gap in the higher realm of housing, in other areas, the lower end of housing. And so this is really about, identifying those parts and pieces. For example, the Urban Land Conservancy has asked us, where are some areas that we should be focusing on if we want to build affordable housing? Looking at areas that are prime for redevelopment. So that's kind of what that inventory looks like. The next one is around a rental renter tenant sort of matching software program. We do this right now as kind of ad hoc with our landlord recruiter that we help to employ through the Aurora Housing Authority. She's fabulous. She works with landlords that have available properties, that have sort of the type of folks they're looking for, and then she matches up folks that are either in sort of a homelessness prevention realm, who have recently lost housing, they're looking to replace. Just by way of example, recently she worked with the fire victims from Galena Street and helped them quickly find housing. And so kind of expanding that program and looking at some software that could help. And then lastly, really looking at that mixture of for sale and for rent, and making sure that we have a good mix throughout the city. And we're continuing to provide homeownership opportunities that are actually attainable for folks with different product types. Next slide. So with that, this is just the schedule. We have, we went to the Horns Committee. We're here now to review the draft plan with all of council. And then the timeline would be to move forward to council on December 21st to adopt this plan by resolution. Next slide. So the question for council that staff has is, should staff bring this forward for final adoption by resolution at the December 21st council meeting? And happy to answer any other questions as well.
Questions to staff?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. And yeah, I sit on the Horns Committee, so I did see the presentation. I appreciate all the efforts in trying to address a really serious problem. I did have a question on the survey. Just in terms of, I think they're really, really low numbers compared to the population of Aurora, obviously being about 360,000 people. For example, in 80016, 64 respondents. So can you tell me how many surveys were actually sent out? What was the response rate?
Yes, this is Daniel. I can tell you a little bit about how we publicize this. The fall 2020 survey was, like a lot of our public outreach, done online. We used all of the city's social media channels to distribute the link to really residents and others across the entire city. We use things like Nextdoor. We use, a number of different social media channels. We also publicized it through some traditional media channels as well to try to get the word out to the community that this was available. We did some specific outreach to boards and commission members and to a number of groups that had shown a particular interest, including the Joint Task Force, who we briefed a few times through the process. We did a short meeting with that group this fall. The Aurora Association of Realtors, we were invited to their meeting to give them an overview and invite them to participate in the online survey, as well as some other boards and commissions. And then we also reached back out to all of the individuals and groups who had been invited to participate in earlier stages, and invite them to review the draft document and fill out the survey. As I said, those groups include affordable housing developers, market rate housing developers, realtors, different advocacy organizations, housing advocates, social service providers, boards and commissions, and other groups who've been invited and had participated in earlier rounds. We wanted to make sure that they had a chance to see what we had come up and provide feedback.
But do you have the actual response rate? I mean, I guess you don't have it because it was not necessarily like a survey by phone or by mail. It was social media, basically.
That's correct. Yeah, we put it out through just all the channels that we have available to us. Given the COVID situation and being unable to do a lot of the in-person meetings, we try to transition as many of those we could to virtual meetings.
But my point,
just far and wide.
Thank you. I think my point is it still is a very low number compared to how many residents we have. So I just personally don't think it's a good representation of the residents in our city, because a lot of people are not paying attention to social media. They're not looking at the website. I'm pretty sure I could probably take a poll of my neighbors in Southeast Aurora, and most of them would say never heard of it. So I just want us to caution using the results of the survey to make policy changes, because I do think it's a very small percentage. And then, again, 64 people in Ward in 80016. I mean, there's got to be 60,000 people in that zip code. And then during the Horns meeting, I did ask a question and I haven't gotten the answer, which was, could I get the results from the Joint Task Force And you said that you did do a short meeting this fall, one meeting, it sounds like. And the reason I'm very interested in the Joint Task Force is because, as you know, that represents the development community. And a lot of these ideas are great, like changing the UDO and trying to bring a more, more diverse housing product into the market, or different pilot programs, and just really a variety of different new ideas, which is great. But I really wanted to know the developer's perspective on this, because in the end, we don't build houses. The developers, the builders build the houses. So if they, I'd like to know like if they had any reservations, what their obstacles were. So I did ask for the findings of that and I did not receive it. Do you have that?
I have an overview of that. We did, in this final round, this survey outreach, we did meet with the Joint Task Force briefly. They listened to our presentation. They didn't have any specific comments at that meeting, but they were all invited to provide their input through the survey instrument, and that was distributed through that organization. The same with the Aurora Association of Realtors.
And that Association of Realtors doesn't even exist now. And it hasn't for months. It's now combined with the South Metro.
It's the one over on, is it Evans Court?
Right. They're not there anymore.
Okay, I may have the name wrong.
We met with them in August.
Okay, I thought they weren't around in August, but maybe I'm wrong. Well, I still would like, that's what I asked for at the Horns meeting, is the results from the Joint Task Force survey, what they responded with. I realize not everybody participated from the Joint Task Force, but I did want to have that actual data.
Sure, and I've got a couple slides here. I can show you the information that we received from those surveys that self-identified as either home builders or developers, realtors, or lending professionals.
Okay.
Bear with me a moment.
Okay, sure.
We got about 34 respondents who self-identify as one of those groups.
Okay.
And it was really a mix of those.
Real estate. Do you know how many were real estate versus builder? That's also a big distinction.
We didn't break down. Let's see. I think we had about 3% were real estate in the real estate agent or broker category, about 1% in the developer home builder, and I believe about 1% of the total response from the finance and lending professionals. And obviously, some people identified as a couple of those.
So,
but I've got the
ahead,
these are the average rankings for both the policy recommendations from just those 34 individuals. As you can see, it's sort of a mixed response as well, but generally favorable, again, on that 1 to 5 scale.
Right. So the only thing is, I know this is going to go forward to an actual vote on the next agenda, but it's right now, it's not a finalized plan. And so I guess my question is, you bring forward the final adoption. Where's the final version? Are we going to have that well in advance of December 21st to really look at it?
So right now, the plan is really kind of in a final draft version. We're still calling it a draft just because we wanted to incorporate any feedback that we would get tonight during this discussion. So once we put the packet together, it will be the final version.
Okay, so I guess without knowing specifically what the concerns were of the Joint Task Force, I just want to make sure that we're not putting something into, final version that would be in contradiction to what could actually possibly even happen. Because a lot of times we do this so often with our council, is that we move things forward and then find out later, it's not 100% working the way it's supposed to be. So we spent over 5 years on developing the UDO. I know we're going to make changes to it. I just want to make sure that things make sense, so that it can move forward and that we can actually accomplish these goals without realizing we were idealistic, but we weren't realistic from the perspective of what can be done.
Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember Bergen. And we did go through those recommendations with the Joint Task Force. And as Daniel said, they were a pretty quiet group. They didn't, there was nothing that they said that was, really, they had huge objections to. And we quite honestly just didn't get a whole lot of feedback. So
Okay.
if there was things they were, really pushing back on, we would certainly have incorporated that feedback and be able to tell you that. But we just didn't get a whole lot of pushback from
Yeah.
them on anything.
And just
And
as an
sorry.
example, I remember, a couple years ago speaking to a builder that said, hey, I could build a lower price product for you in Aurora, but your city code doesn't allow me to. So I guess that would be one of the challenges.
And I would just add to what Jessica said is, what this strategy aims to be is really a list of priorities and focus action items for each one of these items, including things like updates to the Unified Development Ordinance. Those will go through the typical process for review and adoption. I know that the Joint Task Force, being a regularly meeting body, we put recommendations in front of them all the time in more detail as those things are put together in detail, going through JTF or Planning and Zoning Commission. And so all of these things will go through the traditional process as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor?
Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem Johnston.
Thank you. Thank you, staff, for this presentation. It was really informative and in-depth. I just want to address the comment about our codes and affordable housing and, potential changes with UDO. Personally, me as the representative in Ward 2, who's dealt with a lot of constituent issues, I am not in favor of lessening our standards. I've had lots of issues, and I have a neighboring city right next door with more affordable housing. And, it's fine for maybe 6 months or a year, but siding issues, other issues, when the standards are not as high of quality as we have, while there's an argument with affordability, I then have constituents say, I now have to pay out of pocket to address this. Now, I'm working with developers and home builders to make sure that these new homeowners are not having to do this. And that home builder has been very accommodating. But I just think it's important to point out when we talk, because it's often the talking point I hear from home builders about these, higher standards that Aurora has and that impact. But on the flip side, as someone who is working on this with constituents, it's really necessary once our especially new homeowners who really want to try to trust this process and are excited about their new home, then end up having lots of different issues because of quality. So, but overall, thank you. I'm definitely supportive of this moving forward.
Further discussions?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I also have concerns about the quantity of people. We're talking less than 0.2% of the city responding to this. So for us to make policy decisions based on such a small size, I don't consider that to be a valid poll. I congratulate you on your efforts for reaching out. I congratulate you for putting it all together, but I'm a little bit leery of the conclusions. As a result of that, the conclusions and recommendations in the report, I think adding conclusions are okay, but the recommendations based on those conclusions have me concerned. For example, let's talk just about some of the things in the report itself. We talked about, or it talks about trailer parks and manufactured homes needing more of those in Aurora, or at least my understanding is that what it said. Could you, Jessica or Daniel, could you address that, please?
So I think that, the pieces around naturally occurring affordable housing and making sure that the places that we do have mobile home parks are preserved, that they're high quality, the quality of life is considered. The modular or manufactured homes, those can be a cheaper option for construction build where the modular pieces come to the site fully assembled. There's many multifamily projects where there's examples of that, and even single family homes, where they come together. They'd still have to meet all of our design standards in that way. But I think it's just, looking at building codes and seeing what's allowable and making sure that there is options for that that could be utilized while still, looking nice and being a high quality product.
Okay, I think that's important, and you hit the key point, and that is that the homes would be required to meet our building codes. We've had over the last 100 years, we've had experiments in the city where the city has dropped codes before, and we ended up in a situation where they were building tomorrow's slums today. In other words, we knew the houses weren't going to hold up. We knew that there were going to be the owners would continue to have problems. The resale would be low, and those would be blighted areas within the city. So I want to make sure that we don't get ourselves in a situation in an effort to do good where we put ourselves into a trap and we end up hurting the city and hurting the landowners in the long run. Now, in the report itself, it also talked about things like the missing middle. The fact that on the rental side, our rentals were higher than Denver. We had a good percentage of rentals in all affordability areas, but the rentals were high. In the for sale, we had the missing middle. Was there any discussion about, and in the missing middle, they talked about townhomes, multifamily, and so on. Was there any discussion about condominiums and a need for the city to request the state to help us on condominiums?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the smaller scale for sale products, townhomes, condos, is certainly where that's stemming from, and certainly construction defects law has impacted that, especially over the past 10 years or so. And so that's definitely a part and a piece of that. And in order to achieve some of those products, definitely that legislation will need to be continued to look at, because it's still a barrier today,
Okay,
especially for the lower end products. Over $500,000 condos seem to be overcoming the construction defects, but some of the other, different price points are still struggling.
I think it's over the 500,000. From what I understand, the expensive condos include the cost of insurance to cover the inspection defects, while as lower prices, once you add the insurance to a lower price condo, it's a higher price condo again. And I've always wondered why New York, California, Florida, and Texas, red and blue states, can have condominiums, and Aurora has such a dearth of them, especially when we recognize that as a major gap in our housing availability. So the other, let's see, I'll pass from here and let somebody else talk.
Further questions or discussion?
Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Jessica and Daniel. I appreciate all the work you put into this. But I have several questions, Mayor, so if I can just continue
Please.
on. Thank
Yes.
you. I was curious about your stakeholders, but I think you pretty much answered that. I looked at your map, and there were, because you didn't have the roads on it, I was going by the zip codes, and I saw less than 100 responses east of Buckley. And again, I'm going by zip codes. You had about 650 people respond, but 100 or less from Buckley. We were, and those were from zip codes 16, 18, and 19. And it's been my experience in the past that you can do any survey you want and get the answer you want by the people that you ask the questions. So I'm a little leery, and I think this survey was flawed, and I don't think it was intentional. I'm sure you wouldn't do that, but because of the answers that you got were on the west side of town in the lower income neighborhoods, except the extreme south. I think this is flawed. Where is zip code 845?
That's on the Anschutz campus.
The Anschutz campus, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't on there, and I've had 2 post office boxes that had that zip code, and it wasn't on the Anschutz campus. Okay, so you answered another one of my questions. All the public hearings were held virtual except um, that one committee? They were all virtual? Is that what you said?
So this
This,
round of engagement was all virtual. Last about 12 months ago, everything was obviously in person when we were hosting focus groups and things like that. And the other thing to note is, you know, the recommendations that we brought forth in June were the totality of these. And the 6 that we're recommending are just sort of the things we want to get started on first. We also took all of council's feedback you know, from the study sessions we had in May and in June into consideration. So it wasn't just the survey we're basing everything on, but again, that previous round of engagement in the fall of 2019, council's feedback, the consultant put together that list of toolkits and recommendations. We took that to council in May and June, and then went back out to the community as well. So it wasn't, you know, these recommendations are not just based on this last round of engagement. So you know, we know the survey is not fully representative of, you know, everybody in the community. It was not a statistically significant survey that was put out, but we did go back to the stakeholders that we had spoke to the year before, and we did take into consideration the feedback council provided in June in creating these final recommendations.
Thank you. And Mayor, may I continue, please?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in our backup, it says you held focus groups at Village at Westerly Creek. West Side, that's in my area. Aurora Economic Opportunity Coalition, that's West Side. Global Fest, West Side. Village Exchange Center, West Side. You know, I'm just not feeling like you asked everybody, and I just feel like this is flawed. What happened to the survey that was done? Well, the study that was done where it said that Aurora had affordable homes, affordable housing. We had enough affordable housing, and we needed to focus on mid to upper level housing. What happened to that study?
that is included in one of the graphs, and I could pull up that page for you.
Thank you.
What actually, I think it's on page 3 it's repeated in page 3 of the executive summary. It was there was a graph looking at rental gaps where there are units that exceed the demand at various price points. And what that graph was showing is that it's both at the low end of the income levels and at the high end. There's a unit deficit for those level of rental units. So it's those units that are meeting the affordability for I think households making less than $25,000 a year, and those that are making higher than $75,000 a year. There's deficits both at the low end and at the high end, and that really is why in the document you'll see that we emphasize this idea of this housing spectrum of from low to middle to high household needs and demands, that we try to have some recommendations for all of those different levels so we can fill those gaps. And one of the recommendations is specifically to understand those gaps in the rental market and proactively work to fill those and provide housing at those levels as well.
And thank you for that, Dan. But I'm wondering, is that government's role to provide housing? Isn't that the people that buy the land and build? Shouldn't we be working with our developers? And I'm not talking about any quid pro here. I'm talking about just helping them see what it is that we need and not. I tell you, because I'm feeling like where is the housing for our professionals, our lawyers, our doctors, our X-ray technicians. Why? I mean, we're not focused on that. It's all low-income housing. I see on this study. We're a city of 380,000 people, and I just feel like everything is focused on the lower income housing. And yes, we do need that. I'm not saying we don't, but I'm just feeling like with this results here, this survey and what you want to do, you want government to take care of all these needs, and you're leaving out the people that actually buy the land and do the building and provide the homes. You know, I just feel like we're a strong arm of the government saying, you have to do this, when, you know, it's really not our job to do that. This is not city council's job to tell a contractor what to do. You know, why are we doing this? And I go back to this is a flawed survey. I'm sorry, I just don't get this. I think that we're overstepping what the city should be doing.
Mayor.
Councilmember Murillo.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, this survey isn't the survey that is saying that these are the only things that we're doing. In fact, we've had an 18-month process, stakeholder engagement process, to develop a very lengthy, we've had several studies done, needs assessment, inventories to contribute to the creation of these policy recommendations over the span of 18 months, over, you know, with in-person, virtual, different stakeholders from different areas, you know, residents, developers, real estate agents. So we've had a really broad spectrum of input on these recommendations. And just to clarify, this one survey isn't the survey that's the culmination of all of that work. It's simply a tool that we're using to help prioritize, I guess, the most immediate work that we need to do. I would love to hear the rationale that we prioritize executive housing over affordable housing given the COVID crisis right now. So can you just confirm that those are the larger housing study still includes those recommendations, but that survey is how are we going to prioritize, I guess, our first action steps?
That's correct. And, you know, within the overall plan, there's a lot of things that speak to reducing barriers to providing different types of housing. Often we talk to developers that want to do something, you know, innovative. And it's really providing, like we said, making sure there's a mixture of housing across all of the spectrum in all geographic areas. And so that's sort of the building upon Aurora Places and making sure that we have high quality places that have a mixture of different housing types that do make sure that, you know, folks that are higher income that want to locate in Aurora have really vibrant places to locate and, you know, cool amenities around them with the higher end housing. And then that there can be, you know, the same market rate or you know, incentivized housing right next door that can, you know, appreciate those same amenities as well and be co-located together in those places around the city. So that housing spectrum is called out. There is sections on the higher end housing and strategies for attracting more of those in areas, especially where we don't have the higher end housing, to make sure that we're inserting, you know, for sale products into other parts of the city as well.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So I have a couple questions. First, just briefly, Jessica, can you talk a little bit about how these recommendations relate to the kinds of research that's been done on these issues, connecting to, like, say, ULI and other entities that actually this is their main focus is housing? And then I'll ask another question after that.
Sure. So we did have Root Policy Group help put together this toolkit and these recommendations. So they not only did the data collection and the initial rounds of community engagement with this, they're looking at best practices, they're looking at case studies. Root policy is part of all the national organizations that track this. They're kind of on the leading edge of housing strategy. And so I think we had a really good group of consultants that helped us put this together. Staff is just sort of taking this through the final phases of this, but I would definitely say that they were looking at other cities our size that are sort of first tier suburban areas across the country to look at what some of those best practices have been and where we have gaps in our community. So I would just credit Root for helping us put this together initially.
Awesome, thank you. And then the follow-up, I guess not to that, but on some of these conversations about the robustness of the process, I just want to kind of point back to some of the other significant policy decisions that this council has made related to land use and the kinds of turnout that were had for the public engagement processes in those. In the case of the Aerotropolis area project, I think there were 140 something people total that participated in their dozens of meetings that they held, which is significantly less than what we have here between the survey and the other steps that our staff have taken. And then when we look at the decision to upzone the lowest income part of our city, there were fewer than 100 people, significantly fewer than 100 people that participated in the meetings around that issue, which resulted in potential loss of affordable housing as it is. And actually, I've seen numerous advertisements where landlords owning those buildings are advertising to the new buyers, you can really increase these rents if you just buy these properties. And so that was a decision that significantly impacted the information that we're relying on. We probably have even more low-income folks as a result of that decision that included a lot less public input. And so our staff have undertaken an extensive process, and it's concerning to me that when it's the developers that we feel haven't been heard, we're very upset. But when it's the people who are going to be displaced from their housing, we're not that concerned.
Further discussion?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
So first off, I want to point out when the Aerotropolis discussions were going on, exactly one person lived in the Aurora Highlands. And there was a lot of talk about that. But speaking about the Aerotropolis and the Aurora Highlands, the Aerotropolis Regional Transportation Authority had chartered Metro District to do a housing analysis to determine what the use rate would be, what the absorption rate would be in that area. The Aerotropolis Regional Transportation Authority is looking to do that again as we begin to near the second tranche of funding for that project. That was a very expensive study. It was made available to the city, obviously, since Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and I are on that board. I didn't see that referenced in here. Was the Metro study report included?
Staff?
No.
All right. So I guess what I'm getting at again is that we're talking about 0.2%, less than 0.2% of the city has seen this. So as a result, I'm good with the report itself. I'm good with the conclusions of the report based on the input of those 600 people. I'm concerned about the recommendations. For example, the idea of using city taxpayer money to create a housing fund, taking money out of our general fund while we're $31 million in the hole for this year, and it looks like we'll have a second recession. Having that as a recommendation, I wouldn't be able to support that. I wouldn't be able to support a few of the recommendations. So again, having the report and the conclusions, I think are good, but having a recommendation that the city create a fund for this, I couldn't support. So I would recommend pulling the recommendations out of the report and bringing the report to council on that matter.
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
I certainly don't support pulling the recommendations out. That kind of defeats much of the purpose. But Jessica, can you talk a little bit about housing trust funds as a tool in community development and in housing plans, kind of again, as a best practice, broadly speaking?
Having a financing strategy, I think, is what the recommendation actually says. So it may not be exactly, a housing trust fund. Today, we, have a gap financing process. We've pooled together the resources that we have, and those may be the only resources that we use for a few years as the economy is, where we're at. But the housing financing strategy is going to look at different things from, does it make sense to do fee waivers for development? Does it make sense to, raise funds through some kind of impact fee? Do we need to raise some private funds from foundation dollars that can be matched with some of our federal HUD dollars? Those are some of the things that we'll be exploring and looking more in depthly in exactly how other cities do this. And anything that we would implement would come back to council with a more formal, policy recommendation. Right now we're going to be in 2021 using the resources that we currently have.
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
So if I understand, if it's a zoning change, it has to come back to council. If it's going to be a funding from taxpayer money, it's got to come back to council. Any significant UDO changes, same thing, goes through the committee process, comes back to council. So is there a reason that this even needs to go to a formal meeting? It sounds like it's kind of a, it's the umbrella goals, which is part of like Aurora Places, for example, that we did. But I guess I don't understand why it needs to go in as an approval, because we're going to approve all these things one by one as we go forward. And we did already approve Aurora Places, which I thought had most of this.
Staff.
Yeah, so it's a, you could think of it as sort of a visioning plan, a master plan. It does go a lot more in depth than the Aurora Places. And one of the recommendations in Aurora Places was to do a more specific housing plan, similar to a transportation master plan or a parks and open space master plan. This is really kind of setting the policy framework. And then you're right, those individual decisions will come back. So, by approving it by resolution, you're approving sort of the intent of the plan, the vision of the plan, like we do with other sort of master planning efforts.
Okay, and because we already approved Aurora Places, which was the whole visioning that had all the focus groups and the outreach to the community. And this is just, like you said, that, part of that plan was do outreach with a survey. So to me, it's just, we approved the Aurora Places, and then initiatives, we're just like checking off the boxes that, yes, we're doing the survey, yes, we're doing this. And then it just needs to go through regular council process. I just see it as redundant.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you. So first, Jessica, I want to thank you and the team who's worked on this for all the hard work y'all have put in. I know you took a lot of the feedback that I and several of my colleagues gave y'all earlier in the summer and worked that into some of this and answered a lot of questions for us. I also just want to put out there that I think a lot of the conclusions that came out of this and the recommendations are just grounded in the reality that we face, especially when it comes to our housing stock and the lack of affordability. This isn't something that's unique to Aurora. This is something that actually has been kind of, building up over time, especially since, frankly, the feds got less involved in housing than they were after World War II. We had a housing boom. A lot of people really benefited from affordable housing. They were able to build intergenerational wealth, but a lot of people were left out of that equation for obvious reasons that we all are aware of now. And I think this is, some of the recommendations in here will help us get back on the right track, because frankly, the private sector has shown it's either unable or unwilling to meet all of the housing needs that our residents face. So I want to, again, thank you for all the work you've put into this. And I look forward to the discussions with our colleagues about how we can make some of this happen in the future.
Further discussion.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I want to thank Councilmember Marcano for pointing out that the veterans who fought in World War II had the ability to get the veterans loans. I agree that that was an outstanding program. And that really made a big change as we left World War II and as we went into the 50s. So I agree. Having the veterans in the veteran loan program was a very good program.
Further discussions?
Mayor,
Councilmember Coombs.
I think we can clarify that part of what Councilmember Marcano was pointing out were the racial disparities in the kind of wealth building that veterans were able to do based on those loans.
Further discussion?
Mayor,
Councilmember Rio.
as an example, I have constituents in my district, African American gentleman who attends the HOA meetings, who is a veteran and retired from Buckley Air Force Base and wasn't legally allowed to live in certain parts of the district. So we talk about disparities and impacts. We have people who have lived through that and who are actively trying to overcome, through intergenerational wealth building. So, not to diminish the value of those lived experiences.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, I think the question before us is to have staff proceed with the development of the final plan that would come to first reading. Am I correct in that, staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there objection to moving the draft plan forward?
Mayor,
I object.
Okay, Councilmember Berzins?
Yes.
Councilmember Gruber?
Yes.
Bergen?
Councilmember Bergen? Are there any others? Seeing none, the draft plan will move forward. Item number 3D, proposed 2021 meeting schedule. And let me just say to Susan Bartman, who I'm going to defer to on this, and that I should have recognized you at the very beginning of the study session to make the statement about how people are going to be able to call in to comment during the regular meeting. We'll do that at the end of the study session, at the beginning of the regular meeting. And I think you designated another place for that to occur. Please proceed.
Oh, Mayor, can I add something real quick? Sorry.
Councilmember Bergen.
With the resolution moving forward on the housing, can we get the results of the joint task force responses before the meeting?
Staff?
Yes, we will include the slide we presented and any of the minutes from that meeting.
Okay, but that slide was pretty general, like, wasn't that real estate people too?
It was. We can pull the minutes from that meeting, and so you can see any specifics.
Thank you. I think that's what I'm looking for, is the minutes. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Item number 3D, Susan Bartman.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So we're bringing back the proposed 2021 schedule. This you all heard earlier in the year in November, and you asked for it to go back to the City Council Ad Hoc Rules Committee, which we did last week. And then we're bringing it back forward for discussion this evening. So we have two proposed plans for you. The first one is what we're calling option one. It's basically a status quo where we have 2 regular meetings a month with a study session and a regular council meeting. And then we have a special study session as a 3rd meeting a month. Based on the conversation at the previous study session meeting, as well as during the Rules Committee, we came up with an option 2. Option 2 floats the idea to alternate between study sessions and regular meetings. So you would not have both on the same night. And you would not have special study sessions anymore either. There's a holiday. We kind of flexed around a little bit so that we were still meeting the requirement that you all had 2 council meetings per month. The other piece of information that you had asked to be clarified was about the conferences that you all sometimes attend throughout the year. Very few conferences have been confirmed in the last month. I think we added one or two, but they were confirmed as virtual conferences earlier in the year. It seems like some of the ones that are later in the year are not giving out information as of yet as to what their plans are. So some of those we were not able to confirm for you. Even the dates and times and things were not confirmed yet. So we are open for discussion on how you all would like to proceed.
I will recognize myself first and to say that I strongly advocate for option number 2. And let me just say, staff has talked to me about the importance of having a hard stop on these study sessions when we have a regular meeting that follows of 7:15. And so irrespective of where the discussion is. And so I just think it's important to separate those, and that would allow more time for study session if necessary. Further discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
I am for option 1. I don't think we should have meetings every single Monday of the month. I think we can allocate the time appropriately, study sessions preceding the council meeting, and you can do it reasonably, not starting at 4, but I mean, our meeting's not till 7:30, so it's quite reasonable to have a 6 o'clock study session or 5:30, as well. Option 1 or option 2 that you want also has a December 27th council meeting, and I don't know anybody that is going to be around right after Christmas for a council meeting other than possibly yourself, Mayor.
Okay. Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you. I also want to support option 2. I do think it's very important that we are able to have robust discussions when they are needed on topics that we bring forward. I also like the predictability of that schedule. I think it will hopefully get folks, our residents into the habit of expecting on a Monday night at 7:30 there will be some kind of council business. And I like that, hopefully in keeping with this, we'll be able to keep some of the flexibility that we have learned, some of the accommodations that we've instituted this year to kind of accommodate some of these conferences and things of that nature once we get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Mayor?
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring up, I'm also supporting Council 2, and a main reason too is that predictability for the public to know no matter what, this Monday, this time, there will be council business. But also we had a discussion on accommodating our working folks who have another job outside of council. Today, our executive session was scheduled to start at 3 p.m. Full exec session, urban renewal, study session, council meeting. That's pretty getting to be typical because of all of the things that we have scheduled. And that's difficult for people who have other commitments outside of council, including careers. So one of the reasons I am supporting this is we were talking about having that time that even if we had an executive session beforehand, we wouldn't be starting at 3 p.m. By eliminating the study session, the special study session, it's almost essentially, close to what we have now, but just the days and then evenings are not as long. And then we did talk, I just want to bring up the issue of holidays, and if it is on a Monday, which we will then not have a meeting on that Monday, it would fall to the Tuesday.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember Hills.
Sorry, we're doing bedtime, so I'm going to talk quietly.
Oh.
I actually don't have a strong preference for either. I'm fine with option 2. I think my only question is for staff who would typically present earlier with the earlier study session start. How does that impact staff, I guess, is my question. And is that included in their salary? Is that overtime? Is that going to put an undue burden on them? I'm just curious about the staff's perspective about how we can balance the needs of the public. And as someone who spent the first half of my term on council also working full time, this is important, I think, so that it's more accessible for people who do want to be on council to be able to hold that role and support themselves. But at the same time, I do want to make sure that we're not disproportionately impacting staff. So I'm just curious how we would balance that if there's a staff perspective or fiscal.
Is the city manager on the line?
Yes, Mayor, and I'll respond to that. And one of the things, and I think that the Council Rules Committee talked about this in their discussion, but typically we don't have a executive session prior to a special study session. And one of the things we talked about at the staff level was that if we restricted executive sessions to prior to council meetings, that would mean potentially like a 6:30 exec session, and did not have exec sessions before study sessions. Those study sessions could potentially start earlier and I think maybe address Councilmember Hilt's concern, maybe a 6 or 6:30 study session start time, because we wouldn't be worrying about having an exec session. So that would be one way to address that concern. And we kind of shared that same concern that Councilmember Hiltz brought up.
Very good. Further questions or discussion?
Mayor,
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Councilmember Bergen?
Was that Maria that wants to go
Oh,
first?
Councilmember Murillo, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
thanks, Councilmember Bergen. Thanks, Mayor. Just to actually address Councilmember Bergen's point on the December meeting schedule, I'm okay with trying out option 2 to see if there's some positive impact with kind of breaking up the meetings. But the date on the 27th to me did feel a little unrealistic. So maybe we can just switch the 2 dates of council with a study session and council meetings just for that month to accommodate the holiday timeframe, even though it doesn't fall exactly on a holiday.
Susan, could you comment on that?
Yes, if council wanted to potentially change that, and I think I've heard a couple people now mention that they would like to see that date moved, we can accommodate that, and this is a great time to do that so that when we come back on the 21st in the regular meeting, you guys have a final or something that is kind of really showing you exactly what those dates are going to be, because you are required to adopt some schedule on the 21st.
Okay. I think I would agree with Councilmember Murillo that the 27th, I love option 2, but the 27th is very unrealistic.
So you agree with Councilmember Bergen as well, then?
Mayor.
You're an option 1 person. Councilmember Gardner.
Real quick on the 27th, on the December. So I think that's a good idea to flip them. And then would that, maybe I'm not understanding this 100%. So if we did that and had council meetings on the 6th and 20th of December, is it possible that we would not have a study session on the 27th if not needed?
I don't think we should have a meeting on the 27th. Susan?
My understanding is you are only required by charter to meet formally twice per month. So there's no requirement to have a study session or 2 study sessions a month. You could elect just to schedule 1 at this point.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor.
Option number 1 and option number 2.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gardner.
So I think it kind of defeats the purpose. We're saying that we should go with option 2 because it gives certainty to the public, and then feels like we're going to kind of play whack-a-mole with meetings around holidays. This year we had a study session 3 days before Thanksgiving. We have a council meeting 4 days before Christmas. There's always going to be those things. I would say that we should stick with what the schedule is. All council members are free to miss a meeting if they can't make it for whatever reason. But I don't see a reason to veer from whatever we're going to pick. So if we go with option 2, I think we stick with 2nd and 4th Monday for a regular meeting and 1st and 3rd for study session, and the chips fall where they may, if you will.
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
Mayor, I just wanted to.
Councilmember Lawson, and then I'll go to Councilmember Bergen.
Okay, Mayor, I just wanted to get clarification. So I'm for option two. I'm really advocating for working people because, I really think that, a lot of people don't have certain situations. They do have to work. Even in future councils, you're going to get, you want people to be part of the civic process if they decide to do so. So my question is, are we going to start these other meetings, I guess the study sessions at 6:30, or are you trying to do this early like we have before? Because if you're starting these meetings at 4:00, I mean, I probably wouldn't even go with this option. I mean, I understand the public, having that information, but I really think it's important to look at working people, and I'm advocating for that for sure, even for future councils. So can you make a clarification? Would those study sessions start at 6:30 to give people the available time to get to where they're at? Right now, we're virtual, but eventually people will have to go to the office, and there's sometimes people do have to go to the office. So I'm just looking at that particular scenario.
I can answer that
So
question.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. I think that is the intent. If we split them out, they would both, your meeting would always typically, start after 5, including an executive session, I think is the idea. So there are, that is one advantage of splitting them out, is it gives you a very consistent start time. We would not have these earlier start times, because part of what drives the earlier start time in our current, like this evening, is we have a lot of agenda items that are going to generate some conversation. And so in order to give that time to those items, we have to start earlier. And so splitting it out does create an advantage there.
And Mayor, can I just make a comment here?
Councilmember Lawson.
As well, okay, thank you for that clarification. I think it's very important for us to think through in the future as well. When you put a lot of controversial items on an agenda sometimes, I mean, I don't understand, since I've been on council, why we can't sometimes spread a lot of those out. We know they're going to be controversial. We know that they're going to have a lot of public input. We know we're going to have a lot of comments. So I'm just trying to put that into the minds of people, as we're looking forward and how we're doing our agendas. And I understand everything has to go through policy and all of that, but I think that that's something important to look at as well. But I thank you for that clarification. It'll be interesting to see how this does work for working people. I see some people, if they can't attend the meeting, they can't. So, but thank you for the clarification.
For further discussion, and then I'll get a sense of the council on option number 2, and then if we don't have support there, we'll go to option number 1.
Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen.
So, I mean, I would be fine if we go to option 2, but I think, I mean, this is why we're doing this, is we're allowed to change the calendar right now. We do it every year, and every year people are like, can we take this one off because it conflicts with a conference or conflicts with, holiday or whatever. So we do this. It's not a big deal to make some changes. So if we're going to do option 2, I do think we should flip the council meetings to be the 6th and the 20th of December. And the reason is that's a vote. That is our recorded vote. And so I would rather, a lot of us do have family coming in during the Christmas vacation, our children, for example, that are grown and live elsewhere, and we would love to see them and spend time with them. So if I miss a study session, it's not as bad, but I don't want to miss a council meeting where I have a recorded vote. So I just hope that my fellow colleagues will take that into consideration.
But let's vote up or down, or let me get a sense of the council up or down first, and then we'll talk about some exceptions to that. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I just wanted to add to Councilmember Bergen's point is, for me, for December, I'm not holding a town hall meeting. It's during a time where it's holidays and I'm just prioritizing family, and it's hard with constituent schedules as well. And also, we have neighboring governing bodies like Adams County. They actually have a break where they just don't do meetings during that time. They have like a winter session. So I support, I know it's different, and I get your point Councilmember Gardner for that consistency, but I think just in terms of the holidays, that having that accommodation, recognizing this is a part-time job, and we have some other things that, I mean, I'd even be, so I support making that change for the month of December with option 2. Thanks.
Okay, so let me go, I'm sorry,
Burzins?
Councilmember Burzins.
Thank you. I was looking at both of them, option 1, option 2. Option 1 has December 6th as a council meeting. Option 2 has December 6th as a study session. And I just want to remind everyone that we have jobs to do. We have votes to make. New council members are sworn in on the first meeting of December. So we have to have a council meeting. You don't swear in council members on study session. So that is something that we have to do. It's in our rules. The first meeting in December has to be a council meeting. So, and that's not in option 2. And also in June, are we saying we don't have a time for Accelerate Colorado? That date has already been published for the Accelerated Colorado trip. Now it's usually not on a Monday, but I'm thinking it is this year, next year. So we need to check that. National League of Cities is March 7th through 10th. On option 1, that would work. Option 2, it would not. And then National League of Cities again, November 17th through 21st. Option 1, that would work. I didn't flip over and see about option 2 on the November date.
It would work.
It would work? Okay. Also, I'm for December 27th. No, so that's all I had to say.
Okay, further discussion, and I'd like to get a sense of where we are. Councilmember Hiltz.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I wanted to get some clarification and then a comment. If we could do the study sessions, I think at 6:30 to maintain total consistency across the board with days and times for council meetings, that would be great. And then also, can we get some clarification? I don't know if our city attorney's on the line on that first meeting in December, because obviously if that's the case, we don't want to violate our own rules. So can we just get some clarification from staff?
If I can qualify it to the city attorney, and that is, it just has to be a swearing in. That doesn't have to be associated with a council meeting, does it? City attorney, city attorney's office.
This is Jane Brussman, and the answer is the swearing in is at your first meeting. So you're establishing when that first meeting is.
Okay.
Or we're voting on a mayor pro tem that same night. So we don't vote in study session, correct?
Right. You may not vote in study session.
Right.
Okay, further discussion. I'm sorry, who's this?
Councilmember Marcano.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, sir. I did just have a clarifying question because the paper, the document before us in our backup still says 6:30, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought that we had a conversation and pushed it to 7:30. I think Councilmember Lawson, you had, within the same vein of making it accessible for working class folks, you had pushed for 7:30 still. Was that correct?
That's
correct. Okay, and I thought that we had consensus on that at the meeting. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that to everyone on the call as well, that option 2 was 7:30.
But I don't think everybody agreed, Councilmember Marcano.
Okay.
Let me just
about that real quick.
Councilmember Bergen.
Councilmember Marcano, do you mean 7:30 for council meetings?
I believe it was for both, if I remember correctly.
You know what? If we can do this, if we can just decide whether it's option 1 or 2, and then let's we can discuss then what the start times. Okay, so let me just do this.
And we can also decide on changing December, correct?
Correct. We've got a hard stop at 7:15. And then anything not done will have to roll over to the December 21st meeting, study session. So let me get a sense of the council on option number 2. Who objects to option number 2? And then we'll discuss times, meeting time. Is there any objection to option number 2?
Burzins?
Okay, Councilmember Burzins, any other objection? Seeing none, then we'll.
Well, Bergen, but it doesn't matter.
Councilmember Bergen, okay. Anybody else in opposition? Seeing no further opposition, then we will move forward with option number 2. Now the question is, at what time do we start? Let me just say, I think if the issue is accommodating people that work, I would think if we started at 6:30 in the evening, then in fact we could do an executive session prior to that, since we're not doing a study session. And so, and that's on regular meeting nights. And so I would think that would accommodate people that work and would get us out at a reasonable hour. Further discussion on start times.
I like
Councilmember Bergen.
I like the 6:30.
Okay. Councilmember Burzins.
Thank you. Honestly, working people go to bed kind of early-ish, and starting at 7:30, I think it's too late. So I would suggest a 6:30. But let me ask another question while I have the floor. Are we going to change then the first meeting in December?
We will come back to that. I'm going to come back to that. I just want to do the start time for the meeting. Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, I would prefer the 6:30 for the reason that Councilmember Burzin said, is that some of us who are working people that have to get up early in the morning to do our jobs. And so not meeting until midnight would be real great.
Yeah. Okay. Further discussion on start time. Councilmember Hiltz.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said before when I asked about it, I also support the 6:30 for those reasons. And then also just because I think for staff, that's a little bit better of an option.
Okay. Is there objection? Is there any objection to starting at 6:30? Study session and regular meeting? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward with that. Now, are there any other variations? I think Councilmember Burzins, you had mentioned a concern over an issue.
Yes, the first meeting in December has to be a meeting that we can vote. And we can't vote in study session.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, so since that's the case, I would make a request that we just flip the December meetings so that we are council meeting on the 6th and council meeting on the 20th.
Okay. All right. Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember Marcano.
So how does that impact the study session and meeting schedule for the rest of the year then? Because the order here is you study what you're going to discuss at the next meeting, and that's the intent. So if we're flipping those, we would have a meeting without a study session preceding it. So I guess this is more of a staff question. Would we lump in things from the 22nd and the 6th on the study session of November 15th, for example? Is that how y'all would proceed with that?
Most likely, Councilmember Marcano, we would have to double up. And I believe if you just kind of think about the timing of this year, the end of November, early December, those are some meetings that have a lot of items, like just kind of process related items. We had all the bid budgets. We had a lot of different pieces of end of the year kind of stuff that needs approval for the next year. So we would have a lot of processy kind of pieces there.
Very well. Further discussion. Okay. What is the staff recommendation on that problem that's been identified? Susan?
Jim, it looks like maybe you're...
Jim?
Well, yeah, I was just going to, so are we talking about the November study session?
Well, yeah, we've resolved two issues. We resolved the start time for both study session and regular meeting, and we've resolved option number 2. So we're going to go every other week. But I think Councilmember Marcano, Councilmember Berzins have identified some problems like in December, and I think there's been some other issues noted.
Mayor, I made the suggestion that we just flip this, I mean, it's up to council to make that vote. We
Right.
flip the 6th and the 20th to not be study session, but just be council meetings. And I don't think there's an issue, Jim, from staff, is there?
No, I mean, just in terms of the usual, routine of going policy committee, study session, council, this will make kind of a hiccup there, but it's not a big deal.
Okay. Okay. Whose initiative is this proposal? Is it Councilmember Bergen? Of flipping the two? Okay. Further discussion on flipping the two, and I'll get a sense of the council on that. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to flipping the two? Okay, then we'll proceed with that. Are there any other questions or comments over the schedule?
Mayor,
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. We didn't address National League of Cities. If whatever council member goes to National League of Cities has to miss a meeting.
Is it a study session or a regular meeting?
In March, it's a regular meeting, and in November, it is, wait a minute. No, I think in November we're okay, but it's just March.
Okay. Further discussion on that?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you. I can't recall off the top of my head, but in rules, we were also discussing, kind of keeping some of the accommodations that we have adopted this year for remote participation, in part so that folks are able to participate in these kinds of conferences and still be able to participate in council meetings as well. Is that, I don't remember exactly where that is. Did that make it on the final list of changes to come before council?
So that was allowing a virtual option?
Right, because I think that would address this situation.
It would, it certainly would.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'm sorry, who's, Councilmember Bergen?
I wasn't present for the Rules Committee. So if you did the virtual during a conference, what happens if you have an event? Because a lot of times there's events with conferences. You would just make that choice, I guess, of either you go to the event or you, okay.
Mm-hmm. Further discussion. Okay, so I think question now is, although we're finalizing this in rules, is to allow a virtual option for individuals who can't be present for an excused absence, like going to a conference. Is there any opposition to that? Okay, seeing none, we'll move in that direction as well. Are there any other issues pertaining to the schedule? Seeing none.
One clarification.
Yes.
The charter says that the term of mayor and council member shall begin at the first regular meeting in December. So whenever that regular meeting is when the term actually starts. The swearing in can happen anytime between the election and the first meeting.
Okay. Okay, very well. Thank you. Councilmember Bergen.
Oh, yes, thank you. I think it was Councilmember Johnston that I know we're deciding on option 2 with the December changes, but I just want to get clarification. She had mentioned some jurisdictions don't have meetings in the month of December. I'm not saying not have any, but we might take that into consideration. Maybe have a first meeting in December or 2 meetings, but not do all 4. We're not like the legislators or Congress. We don't get summers off. We go all year round. So it might be something, I don't know if that would be in rules to be considered.
I don't think we can. I think that we have to meet the minimum obligations of the charter. And there's no exception in terms of December under the charter. And I think, is it right, Jim, the charter requires 2 meetings a month?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. And those are regular meetings?
2 regular council meetings.
That's That's not, unless we're gonna, unless you want to amend the charter, that's not to our discretion. Further questions or comments on the schedule? Then we will move on. I believe that staff has direction in terms of where we want to go. Item number 3E, repealing chapter 4575 breed restrictions by ordinance or by ballot. Since I've got one of the proposals that are up, I'm going to defer to our longest tenured at-large member, Councilmember Lawson, to take the virtual gavel from me. And
Mayor.
Point of process, I don't think that the mayor pro tem is introducing either of these, so couldn't she just do it?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's correct. The mayor pro tem.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Just a point of order. We have the conversation around, we have at least three agenda items to discuss, and we've gone significantly over on some of the items. So I was hoping you could address how long we are going to talk about each item so that we get through our full agenda today.
Definitely. I believe that I would just be chairing the portion on the breed-specific legislation, removing that, and then Mayor Kaufman, would you chair the Safer Aurora version?
Yeah, I'll take item number 3F and 3G.
Okay, and then also Mayor Kaufman, the hard stop, just to give you time to transition and staff. What time is that?
7:15.
7:15. Okay.
Yeah. And then any unfinished items will go to the next study session.
Right. Okay. So I just want to touch base with our mayor in terms of those other items to make sure that we have, so that is about an hour, but of course the end of the meeting are the updates. Sometimes we put that off. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it and losing time, but are we able to have at least 15 minutes for these three?
Yeah, I think we can, for number 5, items of the city council, what I want to do in the future without objection is to combine them with individual council reports. And so, but I wanted to give a warning for people to do that. But if we don't get to that, we can defer that to the next study session as well.
Okay, thank you. So if I proceed with chairing this next portion for 20 minutes is to the sponsors of that, and then to the sponsors with Safer Aurora for that remaining time, is that adequate time? Councilmember Hiltz, and then Councilmember Murillo for the other two items, is that adequate to, I don't know if you want to do 20 and 20 or 40 together?
Mayor? Yeah, I mean, if we could have at least 40 minutes, since we have two agenda items.
You know what, these were added at the end. And if we don't get to them, we will get to them in the next study session.
Mayor, with all due respect, they're on the agenda.
Yeah.
Councilmember Murillo, since I'll be chairing the first section, I'll make sure that we are moving that along.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. Mayor? Yes. Oh, sorry. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Bergen. When we're saying, study session is time for us to ask questions. So are we going to have opportunity to ask questions, or are we just getting a presentation?
No, we're going to be deciding direction on these issues. And so it's the ability to ask questions and there'll be a presentation.
Okay, because we have never had, we have always been given opportunities to ask our questions fully, because that is our opportunity before it goes to the floor for a vote. So I just want to make sure we don't, cut short that part.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mayor, I'm very much ready for both of us to get started on this next agenda item.
Very well.
Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, may I proceed?
Please.
Okay, thank you. So I just would like to ask Councilmember Hiltz, would you like to have, just for time's sake, a presentation from staff? Do you or Councilmember Coombs have any words you'd like to start with?
I mean, I can do a quick introduction. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. This is not the first time we've had this conversation. This was tabled by council. We know that this ban is time and resource intensive. We know that the data doesn't bear it out. We know that I have it learned down, American Veterinary Medical Association, I always get that one wrong, CDC, ASPCA, the Bar Association, they all oppose this. I think the question really comes down to the mechanism moving forward with a repeal. I think that with the new dangerous dog ordinance in place and the robust outreach that the city did with the animal code revisions, that it's appropriate for council to do the repeal. And so that's the proposal that I have on the table. I don't know if Councilmember Coombs has something else to add. I do want to make sure that we get through all of the agenda items. This is not the first time we've had this conversation. I think we've heard from almost everyone on council multiple times about where they stand on this issue and why and the different ones. So I don't think we need to really get into a long, detailed conversation about it. So hopefully, we can keep it short and sweet and then have, vote on the two proposals on the table. But I'll leave it to Councilmember Coombs if she wants to add anything to that. But thank you, everyone. And like I said, this is more than 3 years in the making for me. So certainly not a surprise to anyone where I stand or why or the research that I've done. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Coombs, did you have anything to add to that?
Just briefly, I want to make sure that we address that narrative that this was put in place by the voters. It was put in place by a city council before it ever went to a vote of the people. And when it went to a vote of the people, the information was inaccurate, misleading, and the city did not undertake a robust public education campaign. So those are all the reasons why I support doing it by ordinance rather than by ballot.
Thank you. I'd also like to confirm that Anthony Youngblood or staff are on the call to answer any questions. Can we just get that confirmed now beforehand?
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, Anthony Youngblood just lost connection. I guess the whole North Satellite facility is down. And so he is trying to call in, but I do have the presentation up if we need it. But he is actually not on at this very moment. He's trying to reconnect.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilmember Hiltz and Coombs, would you like the presentation without Mr. Youngblood here?
If the mayor wants to propose and introduce his proposal too while Anthony's calling in, I think that's fine. If he's calling in, it shouldn't take too long.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll proceed with that.
And Roberto, I think, on the line too. So we hear about
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Councilmember Bergen.
Are we not having a presentation for the public?
We are, but I think since there are two proposals, and correct me if I'm wrong to the sponsors, we'll hear from Mayor Kaufman, and then that'll give us some time to get staff.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Mayor Kaufman, could you please provide your overview for your proposal?
Sure. It certainly is true that the ban was first put in place by council. However, there was a referred ballot measure in 2014. It failed 67 to 33. I think that the wording of the ballot measure was flawed, was inappropriate. The question was this: shall the people of Aurora adopt an ordinance allowing pit bulls back in the city? What I've done, I feel that we, once it goes to the voters, I think there's a certain deference that we should give to the voters, and I believe it needs to go back to the voters. But if we look at the language that Denver did, where it passed overwhelmingly in Denver, the language was as follows, and I've taken the Denver language and adopted it for Aurora, literally verbatim, except for change Denver to Aurora, and it's this: shall the people of Aurora, Colorado, adopt an ordinance authorizing the city to grant a provisional permit to owners of a restricted breed dog, provided the owner microchip the animal and complies with additional requirements set by the Aurora Animal Control Services Division. So what it does, the difference between that and 2014 is it really seeks to address the safety concerns that people have about restricted breeds. And so I think that my estimation is it would pass with these safeguards in it. We do already have, we passed in our dangerous dog ordinance, we did pass the responsibility to microchip these dogs. But however, I think putting it in the ballot language itself gives the voters confidence that the city council cannot ever change it. And so it gives that certainty along with requirements set by Aurora Animal Control Services Division. And so, again, I think it's important that we have deference to the voters. I think it's important that we have fair language that addresses the concerns of our citizens and so of our residents. And so my proposal does that.
Thank you, Mayor. In the interest of time, I'm going to, because we heard from both sponsors of the proposals, I'm going to ask for questions or comments on either one. If you could just say which one you're going to ask a question or comment on, so we have that in the minutes, that would be good. So are there questions or comments on either of these proposals? Councilmember Bergen?
Yes. So, well, I'm going to start because I haven't heard the other one. So just with Mayor Kaufman's proposal, you are proposing that it go back to the voters because the voters in 2014 voted to not repeal the ban, 64% to whatever. And I think what you said was, you know, opinions have changed over time and we've gotten a lot of new information. So I personally think that, you know, putting it back to the voters is really the fair way to do it. Otherwise, you're overturning their vote. And it has been recognized in 2014. So I think if we put it back on the ballot, it gives the time for, certainly for education. I mean, we're talking about a year from now on the ballot for education to happen so that people can make their case for why it should be repealed or not repealed. So I think that is probably the fairest way to do it, to give respect and consideration to the voters that have voted.
Thank you, Councilmember Bergen. Do we have Mr. Youngblood up yet? Otherwise, since the presentation can still be presented by staff, could we please have that?
Yeah, he's showing under attendees, so he might just need a minute to get unmuted.
Okay. And if he could be changed to participant, please.
Anthony, if you can hear us, you should be unmuted.
Anthony is unmuted. Please know that.
He's unmuted, but he's on the phone, so we can't make him a presenter while he's on the phone, but he should be able to speak.
Okay, so
Anthony says he can hear, but you aren't able to hear him.
That is correct.
Okay.
He would be now a call-in user, right? Not under his name. So maybe we need to unmute the call-in users.
Are we able to do that with just?
That is correct. We have unmuted him as a caller. We still cannot hear him though.
Does he need to press star something?
No, he should be calling in directly to the WebEx.
Okay. Do the sponsors feel comfortable if I ask if another staff person can present?
Yeah, if Roberto wants to present it, I think that's fine. And then if Anthony gets on, he can answer detailed questions if needed.
Okay. Deputy City Manager Venegas, could you please proceed?
I'll defer to Jessica. She has up the content. And why don't we have Jessica run through it? It's a very short presentation. I really wanted to focus more on the data questions that was asked during the last session. So we'll keep it high level and spend more time on Q&A, but I'll have Jessica run through.
Thank you.
Okay,
Please
perfect.
proceed.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I believe, oh, there we go. Okay, so during the Horns Committee meeting on this, there was some questions. And so these are some of the responses in order to address some of those questions just related to the number of calls for service, for dangerous animals and restricted breeds. And so while we don't have all of the granular data that was asked for, this is some of the overview of the data that we were able to pull together from our call logs. The next slide has a little bit more detail around, there was a specific question around DNA testing that was put together. And so this is some of the data related to that was asked. And then again, just the overall number of dogs impounded and things like that, length of stay. But again, the DNA was a specific question that we were able to pull. Again, this is just the animals that are coming through the shelter in order to get tested. So it wouldn't necessarily be representative of all of Aurora. And then just some additional information that's provided is related to some of the questions that were asked. There was kind of a per capita ownership piece for Anthony.
Yes.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
we can.
Yeah.
We're on slide 4. I don't know if you remember what that looks like.
Sorry. Yes. I do have it in front of me.
Go ahead and jump in, Anthony, and I'll mute.
All right. I apologize. The whole North satellite looks like phones and internet, everything's down. The fourth slide is actually the American Veterinary Medical Association's formula to determine how many dogs or cats are in a city with population. As you can see, we guesstimated at about 380,000 people. That puts households at about 143,000. And assuming that there is going to be 36.5 people that own dogs, and they average owning 1.6 dogs, that gives us 84,000 dogs in the city of Aurora. And I was asked how many microchips we have in the city in our database. Currently, we have 4,696. But that is only microchips that the shelter would have registered. So if you go to a private veterinarian and you do a microchip through them, we will not have that record. So it doesn't mean that only 4,000 dogs of potentially 80,000 are microchipped. Just means that's what we have the record on. So if we start talking about going forward and we have to do anything with the dangerous dog ordinance or anything like that, those dogs have to get microchipped by ordinance. That would be through us, and we would have that information. And then slide 5 is the questions. Do you wish to repeal the ordinance of the code? And if you do wish to repeal, do you wish to do it by ballot or ordinance?
Thank you for that. And if we could just keep those questions up on the slides, unless there's a question going back to the specific data, that'd be great. So are there any questions on the presentation or comments?
Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
So the first question I have is and you addressed it partially, but the idea, do we know, okay, so I think it's safe to say that we know that we have pit bulls in the city, even though they're not allowed. And we also know that there's a substantial number of dogs in the city that have not been chipped and do not have a license. But I said that. So let me ask that as a question. Are both those true?
True. Yes. Microchip. You do not have to microchip your animal in the city. So we can't mandate someone to do that.
Okay, so the primary concern is that regardless of what we do, then we still don't even know whether or not the pit bulls are going to pass us. And if I understand it, since we're copying Mayor Hancock and what Denver does, I understood that when the Denver City Council voted for this. The reason he vetoed it was because of the lack of information the city had. They didn't have situational awareness as to how many pit bulls they actually had, and he was concerned that since only 20% of the dogs were licensed, that it would create a problem. And that's why he wanted to go to the people of Denver. And that's why he phrased it the way he did, was to make sure that they understood that if we allowed pit bulls in, that they would be let in under a very specific rule set. And if they didn't follow the rule set, then the pit bull was an illegal animal at that time. It wasn't just not following. It was an illegal animal. Well, I don't know. Since we're copying, I'll say that for the mayor when we go to that. I'll pass at this point.
Other questions or comments on the presentation? Councilmember Gardner.
Anthony, I have a couple of questions on first the cost for the kind of the process that you described in the presentation. When we take in a potential restricted breed, the cost to microchip, the cost to do the DNA test, and then maybe approximately how many dogs we bring in maybe on per month, if you can say, that are potentially a restricted breed.
So if we pick up a restricted breed animal, the owner gets the choice if they're going to do the DNA test or not. So as the slide on slide 2 there talked about, I'm sorry, maybe just slide 3. Yeah, slide 3 at the bottom. The number that have chosen to do it so far this year is 18. Last year was 34, and the year before that was 83. The cost to them is $81. That has the DNA sample given, sent to the lab, sent back with the report, and then given back to the owner. So that is the cost to them. The cost for animal services, it's only about 4 to 6% of the number of calls we get, but it is about 20% of an officer's time throughout the day once they get a restricted breed call, because of the follow-ups, because of going to court, because of the DNA test, to doing that kind of stuff. It doesn't cost us any more to house or maintain the animal at our facility. We feed it the same amount of times, we give it the same amount of enrichment, we do that. So to actually care for the animal is about the same. Restricted breed impounds this year are lower. I would say per month, in 2020, we're probably under 15 to 20 a month.
So how long on average do they stay at the shelter from kind of when they're picked up to when they're, I guess, released? That's right.
On slide 3 right there, it says the average length of stay for most dogs is 10 days. For restricted breed, it's 25.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions, Councilmember Gardner? Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? And then can we go to the last slide, please, just to have that on hand?
I have one.
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can you go back to that other slide? It was changed a little bit. Thank you. Now, looking at the, and I'll tell you, back in 2014, when the voters voted, we did look at a lot of the statistics that we had. And because the breed ban had been in place, we saw the numbers dropping and dropping and dropping. And I see it dropping here too, which I think is a good thing. You don't want dogs caught and put in facilities. So it does look like that there are fewer and fewer of this restricted breed in the city of Aurora. Would you agree with that?
I think there's fewer coming through the shelter. I don't know that there's fewer in the city, because I think anyone can walk around the city and see more restricted breeds. And I will tell you that a lot of people are trying to have service animals and emotional support animals that are allowed in the city that are restricted breeds. So we do have some actual licensed restricted breeds in the city that are legal.
What would happen if, and I've seen this with my own 2 eyes, a group of young fellas with a pit bull with a chain around its neck, and that was the only leash, walking through a King Super parking lot? What would happen even if this passed that we allow pit bulls in? or restricted breeds. And if someone called code enforcement or animal enforcement and you found out that animal is not chipped or it hasn't been neutered, what happens?
Well, first we're gonna try to find out where this animal actually lives. So if it lives in the city of Aurora, first, just for our purposes for the animal, we're going to give them a leash. We don't want them to use that leash any more than anyone wants to see them using that leash.
Right.
There is nothing in the ordinance that mandates they have to get a microchip as of now. But if they live in Aurora, we're going to follow up with them on a city license. If the animal is intact, the ordinance does allow an intact animal as long as you purchase the intact license. So as long as they did the proper licensing, which includes rabies, vaccination, and doing the license through the city, the animal technically could be legal the way you just described it.
But you would follow up on it. And it would take, and it would take staff time to do that. Okay, thank you.
It would. But we do that. It could be a pit bull or it could be a Rottweiler. We're going to do the same thing.
Right. Or a Chihuahua. Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to continue taking comments and questions, but I'd like to address, as you do, the two questions that we have on council for the council questions. The one is if you approve moving the ordinance, repealing the restricted breed ordinance forward to a council meeting, or if you approve moving the resolution for a ballot question. If you could have that in your comments or questions with your other ones, that would be great. So we address that as well. Councilmember Coombs.
I just wanted to quickly ask Anthony to elaborate. Why is there such a difference in time spent at the shelter between restricted breeds and other breeds?
For the most part, it's because it's attached to a court case. So for the first 10 days, it's going to sit just waiting to get in front of the judge. And then whatever the judge makes the mandate of, whether they're going to allow the animal to be removed to another city pending a notarized letter, which is allowed in our ordinance, or the animal becomes ours of animal services, and we have to decide how we're going to evaluate it. We're going to decide if it's an animal that is a potential candidate for adoption, and then we have to use our Everyday Adoption Center, which is out of the PetSmart Westminster location, and that's where we adopt pit bulls out of. So it just takes longer to go through that process when we have a specialized set of rules for one breed.
So follow up, it costs us about 15 times as much on average to have a restricted breed at the shelter.
Two and a half. That would be from 10 to 25 would be 2.5 times. Yeah.
Sorry, right, 15 to 25. Yep, sorry, thank you. So 2.5 times, nonetheless, significantly more.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hilt. Yes.
Councilmember Hilt.
Thank you. So to preface in my comments, I do support repealing this by council, just in case that was not clear in my previous comments. But I also want to point out that in addition to that cost, that is now a spot that a different animal is not able to be sheltered in because that bed, I guess, for lack of a better term, is taken. And so there are ripple effects to that in that regard. But everyone's heard this litany of reasons that I've given 100 times before. So I will stop there and just clarify, I do support doing this by council.
Thank you. We are still going to have some discussion, but I would like us to talk to finalize the first question, and then we'll move to the second, and we can still ask additional questions. It is, does the city council wish to repeal the restricted breed ordinance, section 14-75 of the municipal code? Are there objections? Yes, Councilmember Gruber. Do you have any comments with that?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
All right. So Anthony, how many people have been bitten, or how many animals have been bitten by restricted breeds since we changed the names to restricted breeds? I think when we talk to the people still are expecting us to talk about pit bulls because that's what they voted on, and the pit bull, subordinate breeds. So Anthony, how many pit bull attacks have been made on people and animals in Aurora since the people voted against us?
So I only have the stats that are there on the slide there for 18, 19, and 2020 year to date. Total bites by all breeds In 2018 was 367. Of just the 3 restricted breeds, it was just 49. In 2019, there was 437 total bites by all other breeds, 69 by restricted breeds. Year to date, there's been 289 by all other breeds and 34 by the 3 we call restricted breeds.
So, and again, I think it's important for people to understand that restricted breed means pit bulls, because we obscured that, council obscured that on purpose to make sure that people didn't understand when we were talking about restricted breeds that we were really talking about pit bulls. Second thing is, as far as the folks involved in this, when there was a statement made earlier that all organizations support pit bulls. I am not an expert on pit bulls, but I've been sent by constituents reports where some groups are not in favor of pit bulls. So Anthony, do you have you read those as well? That there are professional groups led by folks that are experts in this that do not support pit bulls?
I need a little more clarification when you say groups and by experts in this. So are you saying that there's other organizations out there that
humanitarian organizations and animal type organizations that do not support pit bulls?
Correct.
Yeah, Mayor.
So again, the point that I want to make is that when we talk about the fact that that every organization says we should release these, and I'm not an expert, but I have seen some organizations that are equally qualified that have said we should not. The next thing I want to get into is the ordinance itself that we're talking about. It was stated earlier that council did in fact put the pit bull ban in place, and then council debated at the time, and I think Councilmember Bergens was on council in 2014. But the debate was should the pit bull ban be removed? And here's where I think we're getting, just like we changed the name of pit bulls to restricted breeds to confuse people. Now we're doing another too clever by half on the ordinance itself. So the ordinance that went forward to the people said, shall the people of Aurora adopt an ordinance allowing pit bulls back into the city? There wasn't anything in there. If you were a voter, well, I was a voter in 2014, but when I voted on this, there wasn't anything on there that says that my vote didn't count, that my vote was really just advice to the city council. The way I read that, shall the people of Aurora adopt an ordinance allowing pit bulls into the city? That sounded pretty clear to me that I was saying, do I think they should or do I think that they should not? And I think there were a lot of other people who thought the same thing. 64,000 people said, no, we should not allow pit bulls into the city. And 35,000 said, yes, we should. Now, what's important, again, is that we certainly have the ability to review this. But the question on the table is, should we go back to those 64,000 and say, have you changed your mind? Do you, in fact, support pit bulls now? And I think looking at Denver, there's a good chance that they have. But for us to unilaterally tell those 64,000, you know what, we were only kidding. Your vote really didn't count. This is a council decision. We've decided it's a council decision. Your vote was non-binding. I think that's entirely wrong. I think that so a couple of facts. Number one, there are many groups that say pit bulls are just like any other dog. There are some groups that say pit bulls are dangerous. We have 64,000 people saying we don't want pit bulls in the city. We have 35,000 people, in 2014 saying yes. I think that our primary responsibility in supporting transparency and letting the people know that we're listening to them is that we should go back to the people. The mayor has an option on the table, but just talking about this specific question, I think that it's incumbent upon council to make sure that the people that we will hear the people's vote again.
Thank you. Councilmember Hiltz, you had your hand raised.
Bergen too.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I don't think anyone said that all organizations support this. I said several organizations and I listed several. Obviously, that's not all encompassing of every organization in the entire world. So I just wanted to clarify that was not entirely accurate. Of course, there are organizations that have differences of opinion.
Thank you.
Pro Tem, may I rebut?
Yes, for just a few seconds.
Okay, so again, Councilmember Hiltz, I agree. You didn't say all, but the point was made earlier that the people of Aurora were misinformed because, and the implication is that they saw both sides of it and they agreed with one side or the other. Whereas if they were given the information that pit bulls will never cause a problem and are not dangerous at all, they would have made another decision. I think the people of Aurora made an informed decision with the information they had, and I think we should allow them to make that choice again.
Councilmember Hiltz, I want to give you that opportunity, and then Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. No, I mean, I think this is exactly what I said at the beginning, that we didn't need to get into a tit for tat because we just have a difference of opinion and mechanism. And we did the robust outreach through the Animal Services Division when they did the animal code updates, and the survey results from that was also very clear. Several people on council have already voiced their opposition to any citywide survey because they don't believe that city staff is capable of conducting surveys in a way that is accurate or reflective. Again, we've had this conversation 8 times. 8 might be exaggerating, but we've had it at least on the agenda 3 or 4 times since I've been on council. So I don't, feel the need to go down that rabbit hole again. I think we're all pretty clear on, what the data shows, what different organizations say, that there's a difference of opinion. There's a difference of opinion and mechanism. We're all going to land where we land, I think. I just appreciate everyone taking the time. I appreciate the mayor having a different perspective as well. And, would just like to make sure that we get through the full agenda today.
Thank you. And Council Bergen, I know I recognized you, but we have spent over 35 minutes on this. We need to ask the questions, and then if you have comments during that. So the first question is, does the city council...
Well, I'm sorry, but I have the right to ask questions.
You do have a right. I'm managing the meeting the best we can so we can get into it all. You'll still be able to have the comments, but I need to focus it on the questions that council needs to ask. So you'll still have that opportunity, but first I want to get a vote on, does city council wish to repeal the restricted breed ordinance, section 14-75 of the municipal code? Are there objections?
I'm sorry, that you're forcing a vote without discussion. So we can't even ask questions. So you're going to, okay, does council want to repeal? And if the vote is no, then what's the point of the rest of the comments?
Because then we can have a question on if it's going to be by ballot or by moving it to the city council meeting. And that's
but if the answer to number 1 by the majority is to repeal it, then the rest is inconsequential. We have just really lost our voice to make comments or ask any questions. It's done.
Then maybe we should rephrase. I know this question is different than the one in backup, so we can go by the one in backup, and it's first if we want to repeal by ballot, if we want to repeal it, and then have the discussion on ballot measure or council.
Question, clarification, please.
Yes, Councilmember Bersons.
Thank you. Wow.
I'm just trying to manage the meeting so we can get to all the.
I'm sorry, it's a long meeting and we have questions. I can ask a question and get a question answered before I vote. This is totally wrong. Okay, my question is, if we vote on 1 or 2, what happens to Mayor Kaufman's ordinance? We have three to vote on, not 1 or 2.
Well, two includes Mayor Kaufman's, and I can get a clarification from legal, but number 2, I'm seeing it as either Mayor Kaufman's proposal or Councilmember Hiltz and Coombs' proposal. Legal, could you just clarify our questions before us that we have to decide? Today is for the city attorney, what you need for information.
So we need to know, do you want to move forward with one or the other? And which one do you want to move forward with?
Yes. Councilmember Gardner.
1, 2, or 3. I mean,
I don't get to ask my questions.
I'm sorry, Osman, that doesn't answer my question. If we go with 1, then we go to 2, and then if we go to 2, then we decide, do we go with Councilmember Hiltz 2, or do we go with Mayor Kaufman's too. Is that right?
That's my understanding from our city attorney.
Okay, but that's not on here. And I also have a question for Councilmember Hills.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. I want to know, how do you think that you can go around the vote of the people when 64.5% voted for the ban? I don't understand. In my head, if you have 64.5% of the people voting to keep the ban in place, how does this council, how does this council just say, sorry, you were wrong. We know better than you. We're going to do whatever the heck we want to do. I mean, I don't get that. I don't understand how people can come in and say, sorry, voters, you don't count. We know better than you.
Councilmember Hills, Councilmember Hills, you may respond if you'd like, but you've been answering that.
I've said this. I have. I've said this 3 times. I said this at the very beginning when I started it, and I said it 10 minutes ago. When this went to the voters, it was an advisory question. We did not have a dangerous dog ordinance in place. We did not have that robust outreach with animal services where we've seen that the survey results have come back in support of a repeal. Things have changed since then. And I understand that this is a disagreement about mechanism. And I'm comfortable with where I'm landing and my reasons and how I got here. And that work that was done by staff and the things that have changed since then. And you may not agree with that. And I respectfully, we just have a different opinion in how we got to where we are. But again, it's not just me, it's a council decision. It's a majority of council. I can't speak for how other people are going to vote or how they got from decision point A to B or any of that. But I don't disagree with your hesitation. I understand where you're coming from. I disagree based on, for me personally, based on the things that have happened in the years since then. And so, I'm not going to get into a debate with you about that because I very much respect that place that you're coming from.
I didn't want to debate. I just wanted the question answered.
I just meant that for the full council, not just you.
Yeah, no,
I understand it and I respect that place. I'm not there, but I certainly don't, I'm not mad at you for it. Like, I understand it.
I respect the voters. And I think when they say something, they mean something and we need to listen. And for the voters out there listening to this, I think you really need to take note and write down names of who is voting to go around your decision. This is a huge issue in Aurora. Voters make a decision and then people say, doesn't matter, we'll go around it. So I think you need to start writing down names of who is voting, who is bringing ordinances against what you have voted for. It's important.
And in all fairness, I did run talking about running this ordinance and the voters voted for me anyway. So this is certainly not a surprise or new or something that came up after I was elected. This was something that I had a lot of conversations with people before I was even elected. But yes, I do
But you
agree.
need 5 other votes. You've got 5 other votes.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. Okay. And I know you have the 2 questions. I am not for making the decision without the voters. I want the voters to make the decision. But I also want to make a point that on the graph that was shown earlier with the number of dog bites, I don't know if you have that slide available for I think it was like 2018, 2019. Yeah. Okay. So it says total restricted breed response, or where is it? Restricted, it doesn't have bites on here. Yeah, bites by restricted breeds. But since this ordinance, since before 2014, when was it originally banned? What year? Somebody?
Ban started in 2014.
The ban was in 2014, or it wasn't
sorry,
No, it
before?
was 2005.
2005.
Five.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my point is, of course, you can't show how many bites there are because we don't have those. I mean, yes, there's some dogs that are here illegally, I guess, but this chart doesn't really illustrate the true nature of with bites by restricted, because we haven't had restricted breeds since 2004 or whatever it was. So I just wanted to point that out. So to me, that chart doesn't mean anything to me. But my second question is on the question that Mayor Kaufman has, or his ordinance. And on the ordinance, it goes to the voters, but I don't like that one either, because it's not the right question. I mean, I think it's confusing, because the following questions shall be submitted to the vote of the registered electors. And it says, keeping restricted breed dogs. Shall the people of Aurora, Colorado adopt an ordinance authorizing the city to grant provisional permit to owners of a restricted breed dog, provided the owner complies with a set of requirements set by the Aurora Animal Services Division? Well, first of all, on this ordinance, there are no set of requirements. So how would the public know what those are? And it complicates it by kind of acting like, oh, if we just have these little provisions of a permit and whatever other requirements, then, everything will be okay. So from is there an attorney on the phone that I would like to know, if a child is mauled, killed by a restricted breed, if this particular ordinance went through, or if we just repealed it by ordinance and not by the vote of the people, would we as a city be liable and get sued because we overturned the voters' vote in 2014? And that survey, by the way, is not a vote of the people.
Dan Bratzman, are you able to address Councilmember Bergen's question?
And the answer is that the city does not have any liability for repealing under either method, under repealing it by council under the code or going to the ballot. It doesn't increase liability one way or another.
So if they voted in 2014, 64% to keep the ban, and then some horrible situation happens, they cannot sue us for that.
They should not be successful if they sue us.
Okay, but they can bring us a lawsuit. Okay.
All right, to Councilmember Gardner.
And then, I'm sorry, just real quick.
Sorry.
On the part about, on Mayor Kaufman's ordinance, where is the set of requirements set by the Aurora Animal Services Division?
And if Mr. Joyce is here, he should be able to respond to that.
Thank you.
I am here, and there's an attached ordinance with the mayor's proposal with those requirements.
Where's the requirements? All I have is a memo from Denver, or a memo that talks about what Denver did.
It might not be part of your package, but I can tell you.
Well, isn't that important that we have it? Because I have this memo.
I understand that. I don't know why you don't have that. Well, at least I have drafted a set of restrictions, but Denver has not created those set of restrictions either, so we don't know what Denver has done either. And at best we can do now is just make proposals at what those restrictions will be.
Right. So my point is, I don't see how we can fairly vote on this when we don't have the set of requirements. Like, I want the voters to be able to vote, but I can't vote on Mayor Kaufman's because I don't have really the set of requirements.
I understand. We could, if you move forward with the mayor's proposal, then we can bring back those requirements for your approval, because we have time until the ballot in November to make those set of restrictions something acceptable for council.
Thank you. Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you. So I think it's more appropriate to answer the questions that are in our backup rather than the questions that are on the screen, specifically because the proposal to bring it to the ballot and essentially do what Denver did is not a repeal. It actually creates more government bureaucracy to permit and to manage the program. And it's kind of the whole legalization versus decriminalization argument, where we're not saying that pit bulls are legal. What we're saying is we're going to give permission to those people who we say can own a pit bull. And I don't agree with that approach. You know, I think we all know that pit bulls are in the city. This is essentially an unenforceable law. I think, you know, several weeks ago, we passed a dangerous dog ordinance that I think goes a long way towards addressing all dangerous dogs, not just one specific breed. So as far as the questions that are in the packet, you know, I'm in favor of repealing the restricted breed ordinance and with basically what's in our packet. I don't agree with creating a permitting process and all that. I think that's entirely, in fact, I think it would cost more money than our current process of keeping them in the shelter and microchipping and all that.
Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem.
Wait, Councilmember Gardner, are you done speaking?
Why not?
Are you sure?
Sure. Councilmember Gardner, I just want to be clear on this, and that is so you're okay with going around the voters, the will of the voters. I just want to make, I'd like to get you on record as saying you're okay with that.
Can I respond?
Please.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, you're on mute.
Thank you. I apologize. Councilmember Gardner, I'd like to recognize you.
I was just going to say, I gave my opinion, and I guess you and the voters can interpret that however they want.
So you didn't answer the question.
Mayor Kaufman, could I please call on you? Councilmember Gardner, did you have anything further to add before?
No,
okay.
no.
Okay, Mayor Kaufman.
No. Oh, just the question before us is whether or not we have respect for the voters. It's that simple.
All right. Are there any other? I do agree with going back to our backup. I just have some technical issues getting there. But Councilmember Coombs?
Yeah, so I think, again, we have this situation where we're talking about one issue and it's fine to, and we're saying, how dare you go around the voters? But again, I would return to the instances in which the voters said, we don't want to give tax incentives to racetracks, and we almost came back 3 times asking for people to let us do the thing that they already said, and then council changed the wording to make it something that people wouldn't realize we were talking about racetracks. So it's really surprising to hear and particularly Councilmember Berzin's point that who are we as council to make decisions was essentially the question. And we as council make decisions on a regular basis. Members of this council, some have been making decisions for over a decade now. So who are we as council to make decisions? The duly elected representatives of the people in our city who have asked us to make a number of decisions. You know, I think an issue that many more people would like to vote on than breed bans is tax incentives. And we don't put every tax incentive on the ballot. They'd like to vote on water use. We don't put the water on the ballot. So there's a lot of things that we choose for the people of this city, and we can't pick and choose when that's okay and when it's not.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I've had Councilmember Murillo raise her hand, so I just want to recognize her since she has not spoken.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to, I was hoping to avoid kind of the back and forth. I knew this would be a contentious issue, and while I am a little sorry to see the way in which people are trying to politicize this, I think we have, legitimate conversations over the course of a year, if not more, public outreach, having conversations with constituents around their thoughts and about how we move forward on this question. And for me, it was really important to go through that. When we first entertained this question, I had some hesitation. I know the data, the research around, what is going to be in public health's best interest, what is the most appropriate way to move forward. And my opinion is that, the breed restriction, breed specific legislation is not the way to go in that regard. But it was really important for me to go through this public outreach process so that we really were hearing from constituents, as well as implementing the dangerous dog ordinance. Because when I've heard from constituents and spoke with folks, really one of the main points of concern and opposition was around what mechanism do we have to deal with dogs that have presented issues, right? That have documented history of biting, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't have kind of that replacement in mind. So when I think of this conversation, it really is a repeal and replace conversation, because again, that breed restriction, or excuse me, the dangerous dog ordinance is more encompassing for dogs of all breeds that could be a potential threat to our public safety, who could maul the small child, who could pose a threat to somebody just walking down the street. And so to me, I think we have a more comprehensive ordinance in the books, and it almost makes this minute. And additionally, I do apologize to the voters, because the fact that their vote was advisory as opposed to it being concrete, I would imagine how frustrating that could feel. But, it is our responsibility to make do with new information and treat it as such. So I do support repealing this via council because we have a more comprehensive ordinance in the books to deal with such issues that aren't just specific to 3 certain breeds. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Johnston, for allowing me to share my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Murillo. And since you are sponsor of the next agenda items, did you have anything to say on that?
And just again, thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, for trying to manage this meeting as best as possible. I know we can be a really rowdy bunch, so I just wanted to share for the public record, there were 2 other council agenda items, the Safe Aurora, the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, that we were supposed to hear, but because we took so long on some of the other items and the meeting wasn't managed appropriately, prior to this conversation, we're not going to be able to talk about them. We're going to postpone those conversations until the next meeting. We didn't want to rush it. At this point, we would have about 5 minutes to talk about it. And there's no way we're going to be able to answer everyone's questions. So I look forward to following up with my colleagues between now and then to see if we can hash out any, issues or concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, ma'am. So I just wanted to say that I do support repealing this and doing so by ordinance. This was a pretty big issue after in our last election, especially after our public forum, where I mentioned that I hadn't heard about it too much on doors. That changed. So I understand that we had an advisory vote with a fairly misleading question in 2014. The city has changed a lot since 2014. We've had several municipal elections since then, and goodness knows it's changed a lot since 2005 when this was first put into place by council. So I feel like it is our job as duly elected representatives of the city of Aurora to enact the people's will. In this case, I think we've all heard enough from our constituents that they want this to be overturned, and that's where I sit. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mayor Kaufman.
Just to put the council on notice that I will be exercising the authority that all of us have, irrespective of the will of the council in study session, to bring it to first reading for a recorded vote so that we have everybody on the record.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a good segue. We are going to call these questions, but of course, as sponsor, it is your prerogative to move anything forward for any of the sponsors. So we've had almost an hour discussion on this. I am going to first go to the first question actually on the slideshow, and as Councilmember Burson said, we almost have like three different points. But the first one is: does the City Council wish to repeal the restricted breed ordinance?
Sorry, point of order.
Yes.
I thought we were doing the questions that were in the backup and not the slide, because the slide is misleading.
Okay, I'm okay with doing, no, that's okay. I can do the backup too. It's similar, but yeah. So we're looking on page 472 of the backup. Does council approve moving the ordinance repealing the restricted breed dog ordinance forward to a council meeting? Are there any objections to that?
Objection, Bergen.
Councilmember Bergen, Mayor Kaufman, Councilmember Gruber.
I'd support the will of the people.
There's three, and Councilmember Burson, sorry,
Yes,
your video.
I respect the voters, so my answer is no.
Okay, so there are 4 objections to moving the ordinance repealing the restricted breed ordinance. So that will be moved forward of repealing it. The second question is: does council approve moving the resolution for a ballot question, asking voters for input pertaining to permitting restricted breeds in the city if the owner complies with restrictions required by the Animal Services decision? We can still ask that question since that's in backup, but the majority did approve moving the ordinance to repeal it, but I will still ask that question for consistency. So council members supporting number 2 of moving the resolution for a ballot question.
I support going back to the voters for a ballot question, not necessarily that specific one, but I do want it to go back to the voters.
Okay, Councilmember Bergen supporting that, Councilmember Gruber, Councilmember Burzens, Mayor Kaufman. All right, and then as Mayor Kaufman said, it sounds like he will, even if there is not the majority of votes during study session right now, Mayor, you will be moving that forward for the record? All right. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. Mayor Kaufman, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. There's not enough time to address item 3F and 3G. And just let me just say that the sponsor was advised by staff that this was a very heavy agenda and this was added on towards the end. So we will do these in the next available study session. With that, the meeting is adjourned and we will reconvene at 7:30 in the regular meeting. Thank you.
straight